Chapter 256. Late spring, also known as the early summer sun, shines on the earth. Everywhere was green. From time to time, there were some small animals in the grass, but there were more flying insects, which meant that summer was coming. A super sports car was roaring at this time, speeding on the National Highway of Boston. In the world of supercars, people who really play with cars will not drive Porsches or Ferraris. It is because they think it is beneath them. Even the popular Taurus in China is regarded as the favorite of the nouveau riche in the US. Generally, some cultured supercar enthusiasts drive cars that are not very famous in China. For example, Koenigsegg, Pagani, Gombert, etc. Many people in China have not heard of these cars, but many people in the US like to drive them. In some real rich areas, driving a Lamborghini, Bugatti Veyron, etc. will be looked down upon. The car that is speeding on the road is called Rezvani. This is a small car brand in California. It is not a listed company and does not sell cars. This small company only accepts orders and has professionals. So although the brand is small, it is very popular in the rich circle. However, there are always some people who are not willing to spend a few months to buy a car and let them build it carefully. So in order to survive, this small brand launched the first car that does not require orders. It is a car that can be bought in a car shop. It is a Buster Beast. As soon as this car was launched, it successfully entered the supercar market. However, this car is not the Beast, but a real car built by a private company. Two people are sitting in this two-seater supercar. To be exact, they are two women. The woman sitting in the driver's seat has met Jiang Hai twice. Her name is Prawalton. Perhaps Jiang Hai does not know this person. When he came back, he searched Google, but did not find anything about this person. But in fact, this person is very famous in the upper circle of the US. There were many retail giants in the world, but when it came to the real giant, there was only one, Walmart. Back in Bing City, the citizens of Bing City had some prejudice against Walmart. There was a saying, descendants of the dragon go to the Dragon Tower, only S13 go to Walmart. However, this sentence did not affect the reputation of this company on a global scale. This was also the only retail giant that could climb up the Forbes list. It was even ranked first in the world's top 500 last year. As for the surname Walton, it was actually the surname of the founder of the Walmart family. Prawalton was the daughter of the current head of the Walmart family and his second wife. She was 31 years old this year and was already in charge of one of Walmart's boutique brands, Sam's Club. There was a reason why Sam's Club was called a boutique store. This was because the things that were sold here were not things that could be bought in a supermarket. They only sold boutique products. It was precisely because of this that she set her eyes on Jiang Hai. Since the New York beef show, she had wanted to talk to Jiang Hai about buying Jiang Hai's beef. But as the manager of Sam's Club, she had to consider the company's interests. Nothing can be done just because you say so. Therefore, she specially went to talk to her father these days, and even called for a board meeting to discuss this matter. In the end, she got the rights to sell the beef for $1 billion US. Of course, she could increase the price further, but she had to consider this. After negotiating these things, she hurriedly came to find Jiang Hai, but she didn't come alone. Sitting beside Prawalton was the girl that Jiang Hai had met twice, Selena Gomez. Recently, Gomez had not been in a good mood. Her ex-boyfriend, Justin Bieber, was talking about her everywhere. There were also some small celebrities who had been using her for hype, which also had some impact on her work. In addition, the new DJ she found seemed to be a little unreliable. After she clearly refused his private invitation several times, he didn't seem to care too much about her music creation, which made her a little upset. This time, with Walton's invitation, she agreed without hesitation. She really needed some time to relax. The weather here in Boston is much better than in New York. Look at how cool it is. While driving, Prawalton said to the girl next to him. It was obvious that she was in a good mood. Yeah. With a chuckle, Selena Gomez said weakly. But she had to admit that the weather here was really good. Boston was located in a bay, which made it not hot in summer and not cold in winter. For example, it was now the end of April and the beginning of May. According to Boston's dimension, many places were already more than 20 degrees. In some central areas, it may have reached 25 or 26 degrees, or even higher. But here it was still only about 20 degrees. The hottest time was 1 or 2 degrees. When it was cold, it was 17 or 80 degrees. The temperature difference between day and night was not big. Coupled with the sea breeze, it was very comfortable to wear a short-sleeved shirt inside and a jacket outside. Don't think about such messy things. Aren't we just out to play? You have to relax. Maybe seeing that his companion was not very happy, Prawalton also chuckled. She put her hand, which was originally on the gear lever, gently on the tight thigh of the girl next to her. As her hand was put on, the girl couldn't help but tremble, but she still picked up her hand and put it back. Seeing that Selena didn't seem to like this, Prawalton also shrugged. She stepped on the accelerator and accelerated instantly, rushing toward the address Jiang Hai told her. Soon, a gate appeared in front of them. Jiang Hai's manor was originally called Green Forest. However, Jiang Hai was not an Irish fairy, so after he came, he had already reported to the local government during the new year and turned the original Green Forest into Soaring Dragon Manor. Although the locals still like to call this manor Green Forest, Soaring Dragon was already the official name. Jiang Hai also changed the gate of the manor. Not only was it replaced with an electronic switch, but he also deliberately engraved the appearance of a Huaxia dragon on the gate of the manor. When he first engraved this dragon, he almost made a fool of himself because the other party always thought that Jiang Hai wanted to engrave a Western dragon. After all, in the eastern United States, the civilization of Huaxia was not as much as that of the West Coast. The Western dragon was actually evil in European and American mythology. Its main occupation was to snatch princesses, collect treasures, and slaughter villages. They didn't quite understand why Jiang Hai wanted to engrave such a thing, but fortunately, Jiang Hai quickly explained it, so they didn't make a mistake. Otherwise, Jiang Hai's manor would not look good if there was a fat lizard on it. We're here. As the sports car came to the gate, Prawalton also pressed the horn. Hearing the sound of the horn, the TV at the gate also lit up, and Jiang Hai's face appeared on the TV. Hi Jiang, it's us. Seeing Jiang Hai's picture, Prawalton also shouted loudly. Although Jiang Hai was not familiar with Prawalton's voice, after all, they just talked on the phone yesterday, so he immediately opened the door. As the car drove into the manor's parking lot, Jiang Hai also walked out of the villa. I thought you might have a few cars. Is it just the two of you? Looking at the two people who parked the car and walked out, Jiang Hai said with some surprise. These two guys dare to come to my manor so blatantly? You don't look like a bad guy. What are we going to do first? Seeing Jiang Hai coming over, Prawalton put the sunglasses high on her hair and asked Jiang Hai excitedly, aren't we going to see the cow first? Or the beef first? Hearing her words, Jiang Hai was also stunned. Isn't this woman here to talk about business? But listening to her tone, it seems that something is not quite right. What's the hurry to see the cow? If you deal with us for a spot check, I will buy it and cry to death. So we are going to stay here for a few days. Your manor is so big, there is a place for us to live. Seeing that Jiang Hai was a little surprised, Prawalton leaned on the car behind her and said with a light face, what do you mean? Looking at her appearance, Jiang Hai had already guessed what she meant, but he still couldn't believe it. Are all the women in the United States so friendly? No way. Let's play first, then talk about business. Didn't you invite us to come over to play? You won't regret it, right? Seeing Jiang Hai's helpless look, Prawalton laughed and pulled Selena Gomez beside her and walked toward Jiang Hai's villa. Looking at the two women who seemed to have made up their minds, Jiang Hai grinned. In fact, in Huaxia, they would contact each other when they had time and come out to play when they had time. These words were nothing more than courtesy. These Americans were really honest. But after all, these words were said by him. Although Jiang Hai was not very used to two guests suddenly coming to his manor, he was usually quite bored at home. Now that someone came here to play, he didn't care. Okay, as long as you don't worry, then I will prepare 2 rooms for you. Looking at the two women's indifferent look, Jiang Hai shrugged. Not to mention that they might be his clients. He did say that he would invite them to play. In addition, he was also very happy to play with Jiang Hai. It was better than being bored alone, so he agreed at the moment. Chapter 257. With Jiang Hai's agreement, Prawalton couldn't help but smile. She immediately pulled Selena Gomez, who was still a little unsure, towards Jiang Hai's villa. But just as they opened the door of the villa, they saw Delina and Marion. This pair of beautiful little girls were sitting on the sofa in the living room, watching TV. Unlike other 14 or 15-year-old girls, this pair of little girls usually didn't have many friends. Their previous life made them not very interested in the internet. Compared to playing online, they were more willing to sit in front of the TV and watch paid channels. Their favorite program was talent shows, such as ABC TV's Dancing with the Stars, NBC TV's America's Got Talent, Fox TV's American Idol, and even CW's America's Top Model. Compared to the American TV series that Jiang Hai likes to watch, they were very ordinary. At this time, they were sitting there watching America's Top Model, which Jiang Hai has also watched before. But to be honest, Jiang Hai didn't care much about this program. Although he liked to watch beautiful women, most of the supermodels were ordinary. Their figures were great, but they were too thin. As for their faces, it was just SOSO. Although Jiang Hai wasn't completely obsessed with looks, when a man looks at a woman, the first thing he looks at is the face, then the figure. As for clothes, it doesn't matter. At least Jiang Hai didn't have such taste. When Prawalton walked into the room, her eyes lit up as soon as she saw Delina and Marion. Wow, what two cute little girls, are you twins? Why are you so beautiful? Do you want to come to my house to play? As soon as she saw the two girls, she showed her most powerful excitement, scaring the two girls. They looked at her with some horror, unconsciously moving to the sofa next to them. These are my two girls, Delina and Marion. This is your Aunt Prawalton and Selena Gomez, aunt or sister. Looking at the appearance of the two girls and Prawalton, Jiang Hai immediately took a few steps forward and came to the side of the three people, temporarily attracting their attention. You have to call her sister. Sister, do you understand? This is also my elder sister. Prawalton's face darkened when she heard the words Jiang Hai's auntie. She never thought that she was old, but this guy actually called her auntie? Ahem, alright, it's elder sister. Alright, you guys go back to your room and read your books. I'll bring your two elder sisters to see their rooms. They'll be staying with us for a while. It could be seen that Daliana and Marion were still wary of strangers, so Jiang Hai stepped forward to mediate the situation. Upon hearing Jiang Hai's words, Daliana and Marion immediately stood up and bowed to the two people in front of them. Then, they quickly ran to the second floor. Looking at the two escaping figures, Prawalton's expression made Jiang Hai feel that it was a pity. Go upstairs. Since you're not afraid that I'll have any bad intentions, you can stay in the guest rooms upstairs. I don't have any guest rooms specially built for guests. The other workers' rooms are standalone villas, and they are already occupied. Looking at the two people in front of him, Jiang Hai shrugged. At the same time, he made up his mind to try his best not to let Delina and Marion be alone with this guy in the future. That's troublesome. But fortunately, when Delina and Marion weren't around, Prawalton didn't act like that. It was as if she had instantly restored her original aura of a queen. She just nodded to Jiang Hai faintly. Then, Jiang Hai brought the two people to the second floor and opened the two guest rooms furthest away from him. Usually, Aphrodite and Marion would come over to clean the guest rooms, so the guest rooms weren't dirty now. Looking at the guest rooms in front of them, the two were actually quite satisfied. Actually, we can stay in the same room. Looking at the big bed in the guest room, Prawalton muttered in a low voice. I'll go change first, see you later. But as soon as she heard her words, Selena Gomez jumped up immediately, nodded gently to Jiang Hai, then immediately walked into the other room and locked the door. Looking at her appearance, Prawalton couldn't help but smile. Interesting. As her voice fell, she walked straight into the room and closed the door. For a while, Jiang Hai, who brought them here, became the most awkward person. He really didn't know whether to leave or stay. But Jiang Hai's awkwardness only lasted for a while. He gave up, turned around and walked back to the first floor. He needed to calm down. These two women said that they wanted to play in his manor. As the host, and one of the two may be his partner, Jiang Hai also thought about what to play in his manor. Riding, going to sea, fishing, hanging out on the beach, that's probably it. Now the weather here is not very hot. The water probably can't go down. Jiang Hai felt cold when he went down. These people probably can't go down, so it's almost the only thing to play. If they want to go to the forest or something like that, they also have a forest here. It doesn't matter if they want to play in it. Just as Jiang Hai was thinking about what to play there, the two women upstairs had changed their clothes and walked down again. However, the so-called change of clothes was just changing their originally fashionable clothes into some loose clothes. That was all. Let's go. As soon as they went downstairs, Prawalton said with a smile, "Oh, okay, but where do you want to go?" Hearing this person's words, Jiang Hai also stood up and asked them, "The beach. What else do you have to play here besides the beach?" Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Prawalton gently twirled her hair with her fingers and looked at Jiang Hai with a little surprise. There are a lot of things to play. You can ride horses, go to sea, fish, but you can go to the forest to burn guns. And most importantly, you can see the cows." Hearing Prawalton's words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but look at her. I always feel that today's Prawalton is a little different from the iceberg lady I saw before. Why is she crazy and a little chinibu? This doesn't fit the image of her in my heart. Then let's go to the beach first. Ignoring the ridicule in Jiang Hai's eyes, Prawalton said with certainty, "Since she has already said so, Selena Gomez has no opinion. In fact, this time she was dragged here. She doesn't care about what to play. For a star like her, a female tycoon like Prawalton, what hasn't she played before? Does she really care about Jiang Hai's broken manner? They came here to kill time and relax, that's all. As for work and the like, it's secondary." Okay. Since it has been decided, Jiang Hai did not refute. After walking out of the villa with the two, Jiang Hai drove a four-wheeled motorcycle, and the two here also drove one in front and one behind, along the road paved in Jiang Hai's manner, toward the beach. But it didn't take long for Prawalton to overtake them. "Where is that?" Pointing to a small manor on the left of Jiang Hai, Prawalton couldn't help but ask. "That's a wine manor." Glancing at the manor over there, Jiang Hai couldn't help but say, "Do you still have red wine here?" Prawalton's eyes lit up when she heard Jiang Hai's words. "Yes, but it hasn't started brewing yet. It's still in the planting stage." Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also nodded. He planted these grapes naturally to make wine and sell them. Of course, if it tastes good, he will also stay and drink it. It's really a good life. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Prawalton couldn't help but curl her lips. She accelerated and overtook Jiang Hai, heading toward the wine manor in the distance. Jiang Hai had to change his route and followed her to the winery. When Jiang Hai and the others arrived, the head of the winery, Dulles Gerard, was squatting under a grapevine and explaining the pruning method and requirements of the grapevine to Aphrodite and the others. For those who grew plants, pruning was essential. When pruning the branches, you need to pay attention to it. Don't cut the head, but cut the other side branches. This way, the nutrients won't be absorbed by the other side branches. More nutrients will be supplied to the main grapes. When Jiang Hai and the others arrived, the head of Jiang Hai's winery, Dulles Gerard, was squatting under a grapevine and explaining the pruning method and requirements to Aphrodite and the others. Because if left alone, these grapes will grow into a bunch of grapes on each branch. But the nutrients that the earth can give are limited, especially when Jiang Hai does not allow pesticides and fertilizers. If a bunch of grapevines grows dozens of bunches of grapes, then most of the grapes will not be able to grow. Not only does this consume time, but it also consumes a lot of the fertility of the land. So whether it is planting grapes or vegetables, these old people all have a way to distinguish which are the main places to grow and which are not. If they are not the main branches, they must be pruned to ensure the supply of nutrients to the main branches. This is the inevitable effect of planting grapes. And Aphrodite Arnold, Dinah Taylor, and the others also listen very seriously. Ever since Jiang Hai's rebirth, these women's feelings for Jiang Hai are slowly fermenting, especially under Aphrodite's bewitchment. Almost all of these women's dream lover looks like Jiang Hai. Chapter 258. Maybe it was because of the principles of education they had received before. Or maybe it was because they had a good impression of Jiang Hai. In their opinion, Jiang Hai was so good to them that they had no other choice but to give themselves to him. But a few days ago, when they deliberately wanted to give the most important thing they had regained to Jiang Hai did not want it. This made these girls feel a little sad, but at the same time, they felt that they had not misjudged him. As Jiang Hai began to focus more of his attention on the herd of cows, they also temporarily extinguished such thoughts. Of course, if possible, they were still willing to give themselves to Jiang Hai, but when Jiang Hai did not want them, their main job was to learn how to grow wine and how to make it. Dulles Gerard was also very happy to have a group of beautiful, studious, and beautiful apprentices. So recently he had been teaching very hard. It could be said that he had taught them everything he knew. This made O'Connor Murphy, who was his assistant, a little confused. When O'Connor was learning skills, 90% of the time, he was secretly learning from others. In this way, Dulles Gerard was still unwilling to teach some things, but he was very happy to teach these girls. But as a German, his spirit was extremely tenacious. He did not show any fluctuations. Instead, he continued to do his work strictly and seriously. Just as Dulles Gerard was teaching these girls, Jiang Hai and Prawalton's four-wheeled motorcycle also drove to the side of the winery. The movement of the motorcycle attracted everyone's attention. When they saw that Jiang Hai had come, the girls who were still surrounding Dulles Gerard immediately stood up and rushed to Jiang Hai's side. As for Prawalton and Selena Gomez, they were temporarily ignored. They did not care about the women around Jiang Hai. If there was a need, they could help Jiang Hai find them. You are amazing. There are so many beauties here. Is your winery really used for making wine? Looking at these youthful beauties, Prawalton's eyes suddenly lit up. She looked at Jiang Hai with surprise, but her eyes kept glancing at these girls. She had to admit that the quality of these girls was definitely very high in her opinion. They were quite good-looking, and it could be said that none of them were ugly. In addition, after being transformed by Jiang Hai's spirit energy, they had white and delicate skin and big watery eyes. Because of the labor, their bodies had become tighter and tighter. As soon as they walked over, they gave off a very healthy sense of beauty. The most important thing was that Jiang Hai had repaired their bodies. So now, their bodies were so healthy that Prawalton could not take her eyes off of them. Of course, it's for making wine. These girls have some very bad pasts, but they have been reborn with me. Hearing Prawalton's words, Jiang Hai glanced at her. He was a gentleman, and he had never touched these girls. It's too wasteful. Beauties, we are going to the beach to play. Do you want to come with us? Looking at these girls in front of her, Prawalton's expression changed and said with envy. However, when the girls heard that they were going to play, they first glanced at Jiang Hai. Seeing Jiang Hai's indifferent look, the girls also looked at Dulles Gerard. The old man was soon defeated by the girls' eyes. He could not help but clap his hands and stand up. You have learned enough these days. Take half a day off. Tomorrow, you will start pruning the branches. Hearing Dulles Gerard's words, the girls could not help but laugh silently. Then, they high-fived each other and looked at Jiang Hai with longing. Then go back and change your clothes. You can come by yourself later. You can drive that F-750. Looking at the girls' longing eyes, Jiang Hai also smiled. He would not stop the girls from coming to play, especially when they were not too busy. As long as they could do their job, Jiang Hai was still very good to his subordinates. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the girls cheered silently, although they could now speak very slowly like Delina and Marion. In order not to appear too sudden, Jiang Hai only told the people in the manner that he was treating these girls, but he did not say the specific extent of the treatment. At least, he would only show it after some time. After all, this kind of medical skill is really a little scary. If it is exposed, it will not be good for Jiang Hai. Young bodies. Should we wait for them or go first? Looking at the girls leaving here happily, Prawalton said to Jiang Hai with envy. Looking at her appearance, Jiang Hai was a little uncertain about what this woman was going to do. Let's go first. However, not knowing what she was going to do, did not prevent Jiang Hai from doing business with her. After saying politely, Jiang Hai turned the steering wheel and rushed in the direction of the beach. As for Walton and Selena Gomez, who had not spoken much since they arrived here, they also followed Jiang Hai to the beach. Not long after, the three had already arrived at the beach where Jiang Hai lived. The moment they stepped on the beach, Selena Gomez, who had not spoken until now, couldn't help but exclaim softly. Her scream, and the roar of the beach motorcycle, also alarmed Edward Anderson and the other fishermen, who were preparing to go out to sea in the fishing port in the distance. "Hey boss, are you going out to sea?" Seeing Jiang Hai coming over on the motorcycle, Edward Anderson couldn't help but shout loudly. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai also looked at Walton. In fact, it was mainly up to her to decide what to do. "No, let's just play on the shore. The sea is not so friendly." When talking about this matter, Walton seemed to have returned to her queen-like state. She glanced at Jiang Hai with a cold and arrogant face and said lightly, "No, let's just play on the beach." Hearing her words, Jiang Hai didn't say much and just said to Ai Dehua. Then the three of them rode the motorcycle and came to a more remote beach in the distance. Jiang Hai's manor was originally bought by a rich man for vacation, so whether it was the environment or the location, it was quite good. In front of them was a half-moon-shaped bay. A few white clouds floated in the blue sky. Below the white clouds was the same blue sea. Behind this bay, half of it was a green grassland, and the other half was a forest. It blocked the invasion of the sea breeze. Therefore, when driving on the grassland, one might feel that the wind was a little strong, about level 3 or 4. But on this beach, the wind was weak, about level 1 or 2 breeze. At this time of the year, it was very comfortable to blow on one's body. The beach on the coast was not open to outsiders, so whether it was the water quality or the beach, it was not polluted. There was not even a piece of garbage to be found. On the beach, there was a very good sand. The only thing that would hurt one's feet might be the shells or small crabs in the sand. There were not even any big stones here. One had to admit that this was a very beautiful place. After stopping the motorcycle, the two women also got off the motorcycle. They looked at the blue sea in front of them and stretched. "It's really beautiful here, and it's very quiet." Selena Gomez ran her fingers through her hair. She wasn't in a good mood at first, but after seeing the beautiful scenery in front of her, she seemed to have calmed down a lot. "Since you are here to have fun, don't think about those things. According to the words of Jiang Hai's country, there will be a way out when the car reaches the mountain. It's useless for you to worry here. How about I help you? Whether it's your music or that little bastard, I can help you settle it." Walton also combed her hair, which was messed up by the sea breeze, and slowly walked to Selena Gomez's back. She slowly wrapped her arms around Selena Gomez's back. Just like that, the two women stood on the beach hugging each other. Seeing this scene, Jiang Hai was stunned. "What the hell is this? Is this the legendary lace? Boss, I'm here to bring you a deck chair." Just when Jiang Hai could neither advance nor retreat, and the scene was divided into two, one side was very sweet, the other was very awkward, Edward Anderson came to save Jiang Hai. Because Jiang Hai said that he did not want to go out to sea, and wanted to have fun here, Edward Anderson thought that Jiang Hai would not just sit on the beach with the two girls. So he just happened to have a few deck chairs in the dock. These were made in the winter, when he and Luo Binsi were bored. These deck chairs were not as beautiful as those in tourist destinations, but they were sturdy. Although the white wooden deck chairs were not as beautiful, they still looked good. Together with a box of beer, a box of drinks, and a sun umbrella, it really did look like something. Hearing his voice, Jiang Hai immediately went to take these things back, and Selena Gomez also reacted. She immediately broke free from Walton's arms and walked toward Jiang Hai. Walton looked at Jiang Hai with some annoyance, and she gently curled her lips but still walked over. The two women only helped to carry some light things, such as deck chairs, sun umbrellas, drinks, beer, and the like. Naturally, it was Jiang Hai and Edward Anderson who carried them. After everything was done, Jiang Hai and Ai Dehua went back to the dock. Because don't forget, it was not just the three of them here. Aphrodite and the others would also come later. While Jiang Hai was busy here, a taxi had already driven into Winthrop's territory. Chapter 259. What's the situation with these girls? Half lying on the wide recliner, Selena Gomez whispered to Jiang Hai beside her. Jiang Hai was also lying there, looking at the girls in the distance, including Pra Walton, who was enjoying it. He took a sip of beer and slowly explained. These girls actually came from a bitter background. They used to be deaf and mute. Because they were misled by bad people, they went on the wrong path. Fortunately, I found them, and then I hired them to help me grow grapes. Jiang Hai didn't finish the details. The dark history of these girls, it's enough for them to know. There's no need to spread it everywhere. This is not his style. So that's the case. I was wondering why they didn't talk or laugh. It turns out that there's such a story. I didn't know that you were a good person. Hearing Jiang Hai's explanation, Selena Gomez couldn't help but smile. She propped herself up, picked up a bottle of guarana next to her, opened it and drank it. At the same time, she looked at Jiang Hai with a funny face. Jiang Hai also curled his lips and said helplessly, "Good person is not a word that should be used to praise a man. At least in Huaxia, this is not a good word." Why? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Selena Gomez couldn't help but have some doubts. Good man, shouldn't this be a good word? Well, think about it. When you reject your pursuers, what do you usually say? Looking at Selena Gomez, Jiang Hai guided her to understand the meaning of the word good person. Well, let me think about it. If it was a few years ago, I would say that I am still young, and I am not ready to date others. If it was a few years ago, I might say that I have a boyfriend. If it was in the past 2 years, I might say that I want to put more energy into my career. Well, that's it. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Selena Gomez really thought about it seriously and said to Jiang Hai. Hearing her answer, Jiang Hai was shocked again. That's fine, okay. I thought you would say sorry, you are a good person, but we are not suitable for each other. Shrugging, Jiang Hai said helplessly. In fact, this is the real meaning of a good person. Ha 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 ha. That's something only aunties in their 30s or 40s would say. We don't know how to say that. Wow, your guarana is really strong. It makes me want to exercise. Do you want to try it? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Selena Gomez couldn't help shaking her head and said. She really didn't expect the answer to be so simple. But after laughing for a while, she found that she was really a little hot. So she couldn't help but sit up and said to Jiang Hai. However, Jiang Hai usually goes down the mountain every day. Today, he doesn't want to go into the water again. Because as long as he goes into the water, the big idiot in the water will definitely come looking for him. When that time comes, there will be a shark swimming to the shore. These women probably won't dare to play anymore. So for their sake, Jiang Hai shook his head and refused her kindness. No need. You can do whatever you want. Okay. Seeing that Jiang Hai didn't want to go into the water, Selena Gomez didn't care. She stood up from the recliner and took off the slightly thick sweater she was wearing. Since they are going to the beach to play, although they don't know if they can go into the water, these girls are already prepared. At this time, on the row of recliners, there is a pile of clothes on each recliner. These are the clothes that the girls took off. They didn't wear underwear inside, but they wore bikinis directly. Selena Gomez did the same. As she took off her sweater, a bikini top that was almost the same as her underwear appeared in front of Jiang Hai. On the left and right sides of the bikini top, there were 2 US flags printed on it. Jiang Hai didn't know what to say. Is this patriotism or not? It's also difficult for him to understand. However, Selena Gomez is a public figure after all. She is used to being stared at like this, so she is not embarrassed. After taking off her top, she took off her tight jeans. And then 2 pieces of cloth and 2 straps appeared in front of Jiang Hai's eyes. Well, this is the first time Jiang Hai saw this thing with his own eyes. Are you really not going to swim? Feeling that Jiang Hai's eyes were fixed, Selena Gomez couldn't help but chuckle. Although this is only the 3rd time she and Jiang Hai have met, the open atmosphere of the UA made her not mind Jiang Hai's gaze. Of course, if she wants to go further, it is probably impossible. But it doesn't matter if she let Jiang Hai's eyes take advantage of her. On the contrary, this will be regarded as a display of her own charm. Oh no. After all, Jiang Hai is still inexperienced. He clearly gave up on such a great opportunity to take advantage of her. Hearing that Jiang Hai decided not to go down, Selena also raised her eyebrows, then walked to the beach with a smile and joined Aphrodite and the others who were still playing by the beach. As for Prawalton at this time, she was also fighting with the group of girls. She didn't have the cold and domineering female CEO feeling that Jiang Hai saw her for the first and second time. I don't know if this guy has schizophrenia. Why does she change so quickly? It's impossible to guard against her. But these clothes are pretty good. Jiang Hai picked up the beer next to him, took a sip, and said with some satisfaction. At this time these girls were playing on the beach. Naturally, it was impossible for them to wear ordinary clothes when playing on the beach. Therefore at this time, these girls were all wearing swimming clothes. In the UA, except for elementary school students, very few people would buy one-piece swimsuits. He had to admit that these women's swimsuits were very good. Aphrodite and the others had never bought these things before. So when they bought, they consulted Mrs. Philemon and the others, and Mrs. Philemon and the others were all housewives. Naturally, they wouldn't play too wild. Therefore, although they bought bikinis, they were all very conservative. They were of the same color, or there were some stripes on it, such as checks and so on. At first glance, it was a very conservative style. Although it was called a bikini, it was very thick. Among these women's swimsuits, the most eye-catching one was Prawalton's black one. In addition to the 2 pieces of black fabric in front of the top, there were only 2 pieces of black fabric on the bottom, one in front and one behind. The rest of the body was covered by metal rings, revealing a large area of skin. He had to admit that Prawalton did have the capital. Her upper body was indeed big, surprisingly big. The demeanor of a mature woman really could kill these little girls around her. But she also maintained her skin very well. Her skin was white and tender, and her figure was also very good. She didn't have the feeling of a foreign woman, who was beautiful before 30, and had to call her dad after 30. Looking at these people playing around, Jiang Hai was also very happy. At least he was very satisfied with this scene. As for Selena Gomez, who was still a little unhappy, she also smiled at this time. In this place where no one knew who she was, or even if someone knew who she was, they wouldn't care. She was really happy. The unhappiness caused by her work and her wrong love life had disappeared. Looking at her happy face, Prawalton was also very happy. It seemed that it was very wise to bring her here this time. Just as everyone was playing happily, a taxi stopped at the gate of Jiang Hai's manor. The doorbell rang. Because only Delina and Marion were in Jiang Hai's house, the 2 girls didn't dare to open the door easily, so they transferred the call to Mrs. Philemon's house. Hello. As the call was transferred, Mrs. Philemon's face also appeared in front of the screen at the door. In her sight, 2 Asian faces also appeared in front of her. Hello, is this Jiang Hai's house? Looking at the middle-aged woman in front of them, the 2 women were stunned for a moment. But the woman with a strong aura quickly reacted and asked in very pure English. Jiang Hai? The boss. He's not in the villa right now. Why are you looking for him? Hearing the 2 women's words, Mrs. Philemon realized that they had come to see the proprietor. That was right. He's not in the villa? Then may I ask, where is he? I called him, but he didn't pick up, so I came here directly. I'm a good friend of his in China. Hearing Mrs. Philemon's words, the woman frowned and asked doubtfully. Oh, he's now accompanying a guest on the beach by the sea. The signal there is indeed a little weak. How about this? Please wait a moment. I'll ask them to send you there. Hearing that the 2 women were Jiang Hai's friends in China, Mrs. Philemon didn't doubt them. After all, this was their own manor. If anyone dared to harm Jiang Hai, they would be courting death. What's more, in Mrs. Philemon's opinion, the 2 women didn't seem to be bad people. At least, they didn't seem to be a threat. With their small arms and legs, they might not be able to beat her. After she finished speaking, she hung up the phone, then spoke to Mrs. Philemon through the walkie-talkie. At this time, Mrs. Philemon and the others were herding cattle on the grassland, so the only place that was free was the winery. After hearing this, although he was a little dissatisfied that his work was interrupted, the only one who was free, O'Connor Murphy, still drove a large four-wheeled motorcycle to the door. From afar, he saw the two women carrying two boxes standing at the gate of the manor. Chapter 260. President Xi, are all the people in the United States so rude? They didn't even invite us in to have a seat. Seeing Mrs. Philemon directly hang up the TV, a woman who looked younger than her, who had been standing behind the woman, said with an unhappy expression. Hearing the girl's words, the woman standing in front chuckled. You don't understand. The people in the United States take their private property very seriously. If there is no search warrant, these people won't let you in. Even the police won't be able to enter. If the police dare to enter, they can even shoot in self-defense. Compared to the assistant behind her, the woman in front obviously knew more than her. After all, she had been here for many years. Barbaric country. Hearing the woman in front say that the people here even dared to hit the police, she couldn't help but mutter in a low voice. At least such a thing has never been heard of in China. Are the domestic police so easy to mess with? Seeing that the girl behind her finally shut her mouth, the woman standing in front couldn't help but laugh. In fact, what she said was mostly an exaggeration. If the United States was really so lawless, then there wouldn't be so many people who wanted to come here every year. It wasn't so easy to do well here. After waiting here for about 5 minutes, a large four-wheeled motorcycle that could seat 4 people drove to the door. As the door was opened, O'Connor Murphy's 5 views, which were obviously unique to the Germanic people, appeared in front of the 2 women. Hello, are you the boss you're looking for? Get in the car. Glancing at the 2, O'Connor Murphy said calmly, Wow, Caucasian uncle, you look so handsome. Hearing her words, the assistant's eyes couldn't help but light up. A young girl like her likes these mature uncles the most. She couldn't help but mutter in a low voice. Sorry to trouble you. Fortunately, the assistant spoke in Chinese, so the white man couldn't understand. After the woman standing in front kicked her, she said in fluent English. Then the 2 put the luggage on the four-wheeled motorcycle. Then, the man started the car and drove them to the beach in the distance. Along the way, the 2 women sitting in the car had been looking at the scenery here. They had to admit that the scenery in Jianghai's manor was really beautiful. If they used some high-resolution cameras to take pictures, they could even use it as a desktop without any repair. The blue sky, the white clouds, the blue sea, the neatly arranged villas, the small villas, and the flocks of cattle and sheep that could be seen in the distance, and the forest at the edge. Such a scene was not an exaggeration to say that it was a painting. This Jiang Hai really knows how to enjoy life. No wonder he's unwilling to return to China. Looking at the scene before her, the assistant couldn't help but mutter softly. Upon hearing her words, the woman beside her nodded in agreement. In fact, she understood Jiang Hai a little. Such a good place was indeed much more comfortable than staying in the country. However, as the four-wheeled motorcycle continued to move forward, the expressions of the 2 who originally wanted to enjoy the scenery gradually changed. The assistant gently nudged the woman beside her with the tip of her elbow and asked in a low voice, President Xi, is this place Jiang Hai's? Maybe. However, the woman wasn't very sure. She had heard that Jiang Hai's territory wasn't small, but she didn't expect it to be this big. It was beyond her expectations. She didn't expect Jiang Hai's territory to be this big. Just when they were wondering how big Jiang Hai's manor was, they finally reached the end. The originally endless grassland had reached its limit at this time. Looking around, the grassland was replaced by the blue ocean in the distance and the golden beach beside it. In the middle of the beach and the ocean, there was a large dock. At this time, not only were there several houses built on the dock, but there were also many boats, big boats, small boats, fishing boats, and all kinds of boats. When they were dozens of meters away from the dock, O'Connor Murphy, who was driving in front, couldn't help but slow down, and then shouted in the direction of the huts on the dock. Hey, Ai Dehua, is the boss still there? Probably hearing his voice, a very strong man came out of the room. When he saw the 3 people here, he couldn't help but be a little surprised. Hey, O'Connor, the boss is still there. Who are you? I'm the boss's friend in Huaxia. I'll send them there first. After responding to Ai Dehua, O'Connor Murphy stepped on the accelerator, and the motorcycle also rushed to the other side of the beach. After about 5 minutes, some figures in the distance and the reclining chairs on the shore entered the eyes of these 3 people. Hearing the sound of the motorcycle, Jiang Hai couldn't help but look over here. But when he saw the people riding the motorcycle, he was stunned. He was not surprised by O'Connor Murphy's arrival, but he was surprised by the 2 people behind him. And just when Jiang Hai was surprised, the 2 people here had already taken a car and came to a place not far from Jiang Hai. When they saw the scene on the beach, the faces of these 2 people were also a little strange. The assistant's face was ugly, and the woman's face, which was originally livid, seemed to have become even more livid. Seeing Jiang Hai stand up to greet them, O'Connor also slowly slowed down in front of Jiang Hai. "Boss, they said they were your friends in Huaxia, so I brought them here first." Looking at Jiang Hai's strange gaze, O'Connor Murphy, a strict German, also felt that something seemed to be wrong. Did he bring the wrong people? But since he had already brought them here, he could only bite the bullet and say to Jiang Hai. But after listening to his words, Jiang Hai's look became even stranger. "Friends? I thought we would be enemies when we meet again. I don't like to make enemies easily. It seems that you didn't take what I said to you to heart. You even had so much fun." Casually getting off the dune motorcycle, the woman and her attendant walked in front of Jiang Hai. This woman, at this time, probably someone had already guessed her origin. After all, there were only 2 women named President Qi in Jiang Hai's memory. One was already dead. If she came to him now, he would probably be scared to death. The other one was the most familiar stranger on the surface, Qi Li. President Qi. Yes, the person who appeared in front of Jiang Hai at this time was not someone else, but the most controversial Qi Li, and her little assistant. "What can I do for you?" Seeing that Qi Li's eyes skipped over him and focused on the women who were playing in the distance, Jiang Hai frowned with some doubts. He really didn't think that he and Qi Li could be considered friends. After all, on the day of the new year, the 2 broke up completely. Jiang Hai had already expressed his attitude. He was definitely going to divorce this marriage. Even if he had to give up half of his manor, he must divorce her. "I came to talk to you. Why? Am I not welcome? Or do you really want to give me half of the manor? I just looked around when I came. Your place is not small." Smiling at Jiang Hai, Qi Li first turned her head and looked at O'Connor Murphy. She thanked him in English, then ignored her luggage, and walked directly past Jiang Hai to the seat in the distance. As for the little attendant behind her, he also hurried to follow. At this time, the German also felt that the atmosphere seemed to be a bit wrong. Although he was a strict German, he still liked the job in the manor, so he couldn't help but feel a little awkward. The most important thing was that Jiang Hai and Qi Li both spoke in Mandarin. He couldn't understand, so he could only stand aside. "It's okay, I do recognize them. They are my friends. As for their luggage, put it in my villa first. We'll talk about it when I go back." Looking at O'Connor's confused look, Jiang Hai smiled. This German also knew that he was going to ruin things. But there was no way to blame him for this. After all, they didn't know Qi Li and didn't know the story between him and Qi Li. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, although O'Connor Murphy did not feel like he was granted amnesty, it was almost the same. He immediately turned the corner and rushed in the direction of Jiang Hai's villa with the 2 people's luggage. At this time, the 2 went straight to the row of reclining chairs, picked 2 and sat down. But the position they sat in happened to be the position of Walton and Selena Gomez. Selena Gomez didn't care. Although she became famous at a young age, it was not to the extent that others couldn't sit on the chair she sat on. However, Walton was a little surprised. Although she showed her silly and sweet side now, people who really knew her were very familiar with her. She could be the least favored daughter in the Walton family, and she snatched the position of the president of Sam's Club and Walmart without relying on men. How could she be silly, naive, and sweet? She had already sensed that something was wrong with the atmosphere when the 2 of them arrived. There might be telepathy between strong women. When she saw Qi Li for the first time, she knew that this girl was definitely not a good person like herself. Qi Li was like a fierce tiger that broke into her territory. How could Walton retreat? Everyone knew that a female tiger was fiercer than a tiger. At this time, seeing the two people sitting in her seat, the corners of her mouth couldn't help but raise slightly. She left the crowd and walked over. At this time, Jiang Hai also walked over and stood in front of the two people. Tell me, why did you come back to me? Every time he saw Qi Li, Jiang Hai found it difficult to maintain his calm. Can't I come to you if there's nothing? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qi Li's eyebrows raised, and her slender eyebrows also raised. Don't say these useless things. As soon as he heard Qi Li's words, Jiang Hai was a little impatient. Hey Jiang, do you have guests again? But before he finished speaking, Prawalton's voice behind him interrupted him. Chapter 261. Prawalton's words were very interesting. For Jiang Hai and Qi Li, they had different meanings. For Jiang Hai, there were indeed guests again. Because the first guests were Prawalton and Selena Gomez. They didn't know Qi Li, so naturally there were guests again. But in Qi Li's ears, these words were a bit of a demonstration. Clearly, they didn't treat Jiang Hai as an outsider. That was why they said there were guests again. They treated Jiang Hai as their own territory. Jiang Hai, we can talk about our business when we have time. Who is this? Why don't you introduce her to me? Looking at the woman in front of her, Qi Li also sat up straight. She was originally sitting on the recliner without anything to lean on, but her back was straight. Her arrogant appearance was like a peacock. She squinted her eyes and exuded an imposing manner to Prawalton in front of her. This is Prawalton. He came to buy my cattle. This is Qi Li. She is Huaxia's friend. Hearing Qi Li's words, Jiang Hai also felt that he shouldn't wash his dirty linen in public. Jiang Hai didn't want to let everyone know the story between him and Qi Li, so it was better to stop fighting temporarily at this time. Looking at Qi Li and Prawalton, Jiang Hai introduced them in English. Walton, Walmart's family? Compared to Jiang Hai, who didn't find out anything after he came back, Qi Li was more capable than him. As soon as she heard this surname, she had already reacted immediately and asked with some surprise. Oh, you know me. Hello. Hearing that Qi Li knew her surname, Prawalton chuckled. She didn't mind Jiang Hai saying that she was here to buy cattle. Indeed, she was here to buy cattle. However, her eyes kept glancing at Jiang Hai and Lu Li. Her sixth sense told her that there must be a story between these two guys. Even Jiang Hai was a little afraid of this woman, which made her more interested in the story. Although she had only met Jiang Hai 3 times, she had some understanding of him. This guy was a reckless and overconfident maniac. When he didn't understand the rules of the New York beef show, he dared to spend more than $1 million to participate. Fortunately, he won in the end and made a name for himself. However, only they knew how lucky they were. If it wasn't for Selena Gomez, if it wasn't for her, then Jiang Hai wouldn't even be able to pass the first round. Although his beef was indeed good, his confidence was a little too much. At the same time, this guy was also a reckless person. It was rare to see someone wearing outdoor clothing to participate in the NBA All-Star reception. It was this kind of person who had 2 personalities. The first impression he gave people was that he was stubborn, and the second impression was that he was stubborn. As long as he set his mind on something, then he would definitely do it. This was also called bigotry. It was hard to imagine that such a person would have anything to be afraid of. However, it was clear that this woman named Qi Li gave Jiang Hai a very dangerous signal. This made him constantly on guard against her, which made her very interested in Qi Li. Hello, you are the famous Walton family and the Walmart Group. How could I not know? However, I am a little surprised. If you are just here to buy beef, then you don't have to come here personally to buy it. Although Qi Li felt a little pressured by the other party's identity, she wasn't someone to be trifled with. She straightened her clothes and spoke to Walton with a serious face. If it was ordinary beef, then I naturally wouldn't have to come here personally. However, your friend's beef is not ordinary beef. If I didn't come here personally to inspect it, I think our group wouldn't be at ease. After hearing Qi Li's words, Prawalton also spoke lightly. Although the two of them spoke very softly at this time, there was also a smile on his face. But Jiang Hai, who had been standing between the two of them, felt that the weather had begun to heat up for no reason. What's going on? If this was the world of anime at this time, the sky would probably be cut open by this momentum. Of course, this was just Jiang Hai's imagination. Then the two of them spoke one after another. Although they were smiling like flowers, there was a sense of tit-for-tat between their words. Jiang Hai wanted to interrupt several times, but just as he opened his mouth, the two of them had already started talking fiercely. In terms of momentum, she really crushed Jiang Hai dozens of times. But what also surprised Jiang Hai was that Chili didn't fall behind. After all, Prawalton's strength was there. In the Walmart family, she was able to manage Sam's Club alone. From this, it can be seen that this woman was definitely not simple. However, Chili only took over the family company for a year. In a year's time, she was able to be on par with Prawalton, which really surprised Jiang Hai. Hey Jiang Hai, your sea is so beautiful. There are so many animals. Have you ever thought of developing it as a tourist area? At this time suddenly, Selena Gomez in the distance ran over with a sea urchin in her hand. Just now, she took advantage of the fact that everyone was playing and snorkeling in the sea. The sun penetrated the sea and shone on the shallows. When people dive underwater, the colorful coral reefs and dreamy marine life will surprise them. But unfortunately, although Selena Gomez can swim, her swimming skills are not good. At least she can't catch fish with her hands. So in the end, she only picked up a sea urchin and floated up. But don't get me wrong, people in Europe and the United States don't eat this sea urchin. This sea urchin is actually used to feed lobsters and crabs in the sea. Of course, some more precious fish, such as parrotfish, will also eat this thing. However, on Jiang Hai's coast, this thing is really too much. Even Jiang Hai doesn't like to eat it. You don't like to eat this thing, do you? Looking at Selena Gomez, who came over with the sea urchin, Jiang Hai asked with some doubts. Of course no, I like to eat meat. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Selena Gomez smiled and waved her hand to deny it. By the way, it's almost dark. What do you want to eat? I'll get it for you. But her words made Jiang Hai slap his forehead. Originally, he was a little overwhelmed here. Now that Chili is here, he probably won't have the time and opportunity to watch the girls play. Instead, it's better to leave here and find something to eat. I came here to check your beef. Of course I want to eat beef. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Prawalton said with a smile. No problem, what about you? Seeing that Prawalton has already ordered, Jiang Hai also looked at the others. I've been on a diet recently. Although the beef is good, the calories are still a bit high. It would be better if there is fish. Looking at Jiang Hai, Selena Gomez couldn't help but smile. As a public figure, she naturally needs to control her body shape. Meat is not something that can be eaten casually. I don't care. When it comes to Chili, Chili is also a bachelor. To be honest, she doesn't know what Jiang Hai has here, so she said very indifferently. Hearing what she said, Jiang Hai can't help but curl his lips. Indifference is actually the most difficult thing to accept. Okay, then you can rest here first. In a while, you can take my four-wheeled motorcycle back. Aphrodite and the others know the way. I'll get you something to eat. At the moment, Jiang Hai didn't say much, and directly turned around and ran toward the distant dock. After Jiang Hai turned around and left, the two women who had been talking happily when Jiang Hai was still here, suddenly stopped talking. At this moment, Prawalton pointed at her clothes on the recliner. Chili naturally knew what she meant, but she didn't move away and just sat on the side. Seeing Chili's movement, Prawalton also chuckled, picked up her clothes and towel, and directly lay on Jiang Hai's recliner. Then the two of them, one lying down and one sitting, motionlessly looked at the blue sky, white clouds, blue sea and golden beach. This atmosphere made Selena Gomez a little uncomfortable. She quickly returned to Aphrodite's side and played with the girls. As for Chili's assistant, she wasn't so lucky. She could only stand beside Chili. Although it was very comfortable here, the pressure in front of the two tigresses, oh no, the strong women, made her feel very uncomfortable. At this time, Jiang Hai didn't have the leisure to care about this little assistant. In fact, even if he could, he was too lazy to care. After all, the person who despised him the most was this woman. Jiang Hai felt very comfortable letting her suffer. When they arrived at the dock, Jiang Hai steered a boat and left the dock. After arriving at the junction of the coral reef and the fish farm, Jiang Hai took off his clothes and dived into the sea. As Jiang Hai dived into the water, a black figure quickly swam over. Ever since Jiang Hai leveled up, he wasn't as cautious about using the spiritual energy in the scales as he was in the beginning. These days, in addition to using the spiritual energy in the scales for his pets, Little Yellow, Xiaobai, Chirp, Bucktooth, and Little Xia, he also gave Big Fool, his bodyguard, 2 extra pieces of spiritual energy. Once these 2 pieces of spiritual energy were injected, Big Fool's IQ and size were now rising in a straight line. The sand tiger shark, which was originally only 4 or 5 meters long, had grown to more than 8 meters long at this time, which was longer than the average great white shark. However, because of the transformation of spiritual energy, its teeth were sharper, faster, and stronger. Even if it really encountered a great white shark, it could still teach the great white shark a lesson. At this time, in the sea, the only thing that could compete with it might be the killer whale. It wasn't because the killer whale was strong, but because it was a group of creatures. Jiang Hai patted its head. He didn't have time to play with it today. He paddled and dived into the deep sea. Chapter 262. Bang! With a splash of water, Jiang Hai also dived into the water. Big Idiot sensed his presence and immediately swam over to him from his territory. The way it shook its head and wagged its tail did look a little scary. But Jiang Hai knew very well that this guy was actually acting cute. It was hard to understand how a shark would act cute, but it did look scary. Pointing at the bottom of the sea, Jiang Hai grabbed Big Idiot's dorsal fin with both hands. As Big Idiot swung its tail, it instantly dived into the depths of the sea at a speed much faster than Jiang Hai's swimming speed. When it was about to reach the bottom, Jiang Hai let go of his hand and landed on the seabed. The fine sand on the seabed sank a lot when Jiang Hai stepped on it. Some flatfish that were originally hiding in the sand nearby immediately swam away after sensing Jiang Hai's presence. As for Jiang Hai, he stabilized his body and walked towards the coral reef. There are some dangers in the coral reefs. For example, there are some silly eels, silly sea snakes, sea anemones, poisonous fish, jellyfish, and the like. All of them are very dangerous. However, Jiang Hai already had some understanding of these dangers. At least he cherishes his life, so he wouldn't play around with his own life. The marine resources in Jiang Hai's territory were indeed quite rich. Whether it was fish, shellfish, lobsters, or crabs, if he wanted to eat them himself, he wouldn't be able to finish them in his lifetime. But if he caught them and sold them, it would definitely not be enough. Fortunately, Jiang Hai didn't intend to touch the coral reef. This area was also considered his conservation area. If there were any precious fish species in the future, he could breed them here. As for the outer sea, it was for breeding the economic fish. After calculating in his heart, Jiang Hai counted the people who would be eating dinner tonight. Although Aphrodite and the others were playing here, they would probably have to go back when it was time for dinner. That meant that the people eating at his house would be himself, Delina, Marion, Prawalton, Selena Gomez, Chili, and her little assistant. Well, actually, the assistant couldn't be blamed for looking down on Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai also looked down on her. Even now, Jiang Hai still didn't know her name. There are a total of 7 people. In addition to steak, I'll get some fish, abalones, sea cucumbers, and lobsters. Forget about crabs. After calculating in his heart, Jiang Hai took out the knife at his waist and headed for the coral reef. In fact, abalones were very easy to breed, especially when the seawater was very clear. Breeding abalones basically required a lot of seaweed, rich bait, clear water early, stable seawater density, rocks on the bottom, no industrial pollution in the sea area, and fewer hostile creatures. It wouldn't be frozen in winter, so it was best to breed abalones in a frozen place. The temperature requirements for this thing weren't too high. For example, the Bohai Bend and the Huanghai Bay near Lu Province could also be bred. To be honest, the temperature in Boston was much warmer than the Bohai Bay in China. The highest temperature in summer didn't exceed 30 degrees, and the coldest time in winter didn't exceed -10 degrees. It was basically about the same as in Lu Province. It was a good place to breed abalones. However, it was still the same saying. In fact, people in Europe and America weren't very interested in abalones. Take the most famous Australian abalones for example. In fact, the locals didn't eat them very much. In some public beaches you could go into the water and catch them to eat. Of course, if you wanted to take them away, you had to limit the number of abalones. Basically, each person could only take a few abalones. It was okay to take them back for fun, but it wasn't good to eat them. In some protected parks and lakes in Australia, these large abalones could grow to 3 or even 2 heads. However, they weren't allowed to be harvested, but the locals didn't eat them either. Raising lobsters in the United States could make money, but raising abalones? Haha, you'll lose a lot of money. Prawalton naturally didn't come here to eat abalones. However, in China, abalones were still quite popular. The average size sold for about 20 renminbi each, and the seaside sold for about 10 renminbi. The large ones that Jiang Hai picked could be sold for a few hundred RMB per kilogram at the seaside in China. It was naturally more expensive if he went to a restaurant. The reason why he picked these abalones wasn't because he didn't want to show off. He just wanted to tell Chile, don't think that he, Jiang Hai, is not doing well abroad. He is doing much better here than you. The blue sky, white clouds, no pressure, lobsters, steaks, and large abalones couldn't be enjoyed in China. With this kind of mood, Jiang Hai soon scooped up about 20 abalones from the reef in front of him. Although abalones were the most abundant in the Pacific Ocean, followed by the Indian Ocean and the Atlantic Ocean, it wasn't a problem to get hundreds or thousands of abalones in such a big sea. What? Arctic Ocean? Sorry, there wasn't any abalones there. Jiang Hai quickly picked up more than 20 abalones, then swam to the depths and grabbed some lobsters. Lobsters and abalones were the same. Their size determined their fate. The large ones were naturally very expensive, and the small ones weren't worth much. Lobsters that weighed about 2 to 3 kilograms were only around 10 renminbi per kilogram here. Sometimes, one could even buy a kilogram for less than 10 renminbi. Jiang Hai wanted to show off and treat people, so he naturally couldn't get ordinary lobsters. Therefore, he specially picked 2 large ones. Boston lobsters might not be as big as Australian lobsters, but the meat of Boston lobsters was much thicker than that of Australian lobsters. The meat in the 2 big pincers was extraordinarily thick, and the taste was naturally excellent. Jiang Hai picked 2 lobsters that weighed about 10 kilograms and held them in his hands. They weighed about 12 to 1, 5 kilograms, and were more than 1 meter long. In the sea, they were definitely big monsters. Compared to abalones, lobsters were much more abundant in this sea area. Most of them were wild, and some of them were shrimp seedlings that Jiang Hai threw away. Because Jiang Hai injected spirit energy into them before throwing them away, almost none of them died of illness. Of course, those that were eaten were counted separately, but this was also considered the survival of the fittest in nature. After catching the abalones and lobsters, Jiang Hai picked up some sea cucumbers from the bottom of the sea. There were really a lot of sea cucumbers at the bottom of the sea. Jiang Hai casually picked a dozen big ones, then gestured to Big Idiot, who was hovering above his head in the distance. Big Idiot quickly swam towards the depths of the coral reef. After a few seconds, the originally quiet coral reef suddenly became lively. Big Idiot was chasing a big fish at this time, and was rushing towards Jiang Hai. However, it was obvious that the fish in front of Big Idiot wasn't swimming fast. The reason why Big Idiot didn't catch it was to let Jiang Hai catch it. It couldn't be helped. Although Jiang Hai wasn't afraid of water at this time, it didn't mean that he could catch the fish in the water. At least, it was still difficult for him to catch most of the fish with his bare hands. But Big Idiot didn't care, he could catch it. When the fish swam not far from Jiang Hai had already stretched out his hand. Although he couldn't chase Jiang Hai in a straight line, he could catch it with his hands. Jiang Hai's right thumb, index finger, and middle finger instantly grabbed the fish's gills and mouth. The fish was already in his hands. After getting it, Jiang Hai observed the fish. This was a spotted grouper, which was originally distributed in tropical waters, both in the Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean. The largest body length was 1 meter. It mainly lived along the rocky reef areas where the water quality was relatively turbid, but it was often found in the soda water area. It was fierce and belonged to the ambush-type fish. It was very popular in China. Originally, it was rare in the Atlantic region of the United States. To be precise, in the Atlantic Ocean, even groupers were rare. But in recent years, there had been a lot of breeding. Although it wasn't to the extent that you could see fish in the cold zone of the tropics, fish in the cold zone of the tropics were still quite common. The spotted grouper caught by Jiang Hai was about 80 centimeters long. It was indeed not a small fish. Jiang Hai glanced at his watch. It wasn't his Patek Philippe anymore. That watch was good, but it wouldn't work in the water. It could only withstand up to 30 meters of water. Therefore, Jiang Hai deliberately bought a diving watch. This one was much cheaper. Rolex, well, it was actually cheap, but it was only compared to Jiang Hai's original watch. Rolex DPSCA, Deep Sea, with a maximum diving depth of 3,900 meters, a purebred diving watch. Because it was custom-made, the price was $128,000, which was less than 1 million RMB, but it was very expensive in China. Compared with the gorgeous shape of Patek Philippe, Jiang Hai actually preferred this kind of sports type. Moreover, for the current him, the bottom of the sea above 3,900 meters was not something he could easily set foot in. Not to mention 3,900 meters. He had to consider diving above 500 meters, because Big Idiot couldn't go down that deep. Its usual depth was about 200 meters, and 400 meters was its limit. After all, great white sharks could only dive to 1,000 meters at most, and they didn't dare to stay any longer. Jiang Hai could ignore the pressure of the water, but it didn't mean that other creatures could do the same. If he encountered a sperm whale, king squid, or something in the depths of the sea, Jiang Hai might die there. He cherished his life so much. After catching the fish, Jiang Hai looked at the time. Unknowingly, it was already 3 o'clock in the afternoon. These girls may have ignored the time when they were playing on the shore. It didn't matter if they didn't eat lunch, but dinner had to be prepared. Therefore, Jiang Hai returned to the surface from the deep sea immediately. After throwing the things into the small boat, he washed his body with water, then started the engine and sped toward the dock. Not long after, Jiang Hai returned to the dock and drove a four-wheeled motorcycle away. Jiang Hai didn't say goodbye to the others and went home first. With the help of Daliana, Marian, and Mrs. Philemon, who came to help, he began to prepare dinner for today. Chapter 263. We're back. After pushing open the door of Jiang Hai's mansion, Selena Gomez's voice entered the room. Hearing her voice, Jiang Hai walked out of the kitchen while cracking eggs. What he saw was still the same 4 people. Just as Jiang Hai thought, Aphrodite and the others had already left. In fact, although Aphrodite and the others had a lot of fun with these women today, these women were actually very vigilant. This could be seen from the fact that they didn't make any sound in front of these people. So if these people invited them back for dinner, they definitely wouldn't come back. It was precisely because of this that only 4 people came back tonight: Walton, Selena Gomez, Chili, and Chili's assistant. Well, Jiang Hai still couldn't remember her name. Go take a shower in the room and come down. Dinner is almost ready. Looking at the few people in front of him, they were obviously not in good condition. Walton and Selena Gomez's bodies were still stained with fine sand, and their faces and bodies were also stained with salt left by the sea after being dried by the sun. As for Chi Li and her assistant, although they were much neater, it was still on the beach. However, on the beach, it was still a sunny day. Although they had umbrellas, they were wearing women's suits. They were still sweating profusely. Obviously, they were not in a good state. Jiang Hai's words this time, these women did not refuse. Selena and Walton immediately went upstairs, but Chi Li and her assistant hesitated for a moment. Oh, I haven't asked yet. Are you going to live here too? Looking at the two, Jiang Hai patted his forehead. It seems that he hasn't arranged a place for them to live yet. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Chi Li raised her head and said with a serious face, "Of course, can't we?" Seeing that she was obviously not in good condition, but still pretending to be arrogant, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile. This woman is really. Sometimes I miss her. Okay, I'll take you upstairs. After handing the egg liquid to Daliana, Jiang Hai took the two upstairs. Maybe because Jiang Hai felt that the two people's relationship with Prawalton wasn't very good, he also arranged their room across from Prawalton's. For Jiang Hai, watching a good show was the happiest thing in the world. This is your room, go take a shower, change your clothes, and come down for dinner. I guess you're hungry. Carrying the two people's luggage, Jiang Hai came to the front of the guest room, put the luggage at the door, and turned to leave. Jiang Hai, I think we should talk, have a good talk, I don't know when you have time. But as soon as Jiang Hai left, Qili had already stretched out her hand, grabbed Jiang Hai's wrist, and looked at Jiang Hai with a serious face. Oh, since you are here, I think we will have time to talk. Hearing Qili's words, Jiang Hai didn't look back, but just said a sentence calmly. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qili's eyes were a little hesitant, but she still let go of Jiang Hai's hand. The moment she let go, Jiang Hai continued to walk forward, and soon disappeared at the corner of the stairs. Seeing Jiang Hai's appearance, Qili's assistant also puffed up her face and said unhappily, President Qi, look at his attitude. He left us on the beach for half a day, and now he doesn't even give us time to meet? To be honest, after she came here, she did change her view of Jiang Hai. This Jiang Hai seemed to be a bit interesting. Although she didn't know where he got the money to build this villa, at least as Qili's assistant, she knew very well that Jiang Hai didn't use the name of Qili or the Qi family to get this villa. And now it seemed that he had some cooperation with the world's largest retailer, Walmart, which was really unexpected. In the past, she felt that Jiang Hai was a mud that couldn't be supported. But when this mud began to shine, she was a little confused. But this didn't mean that she could tolerate Jiang Hai's arrogance. They had already delivered themselves to his door, but he still took it. This guy. Hearing her words, Qili narrowed her eyes, but there was no expression of anger on her face. Instead, she directly picked up her luggage and went to the room. Seeing that Qili didn't speak, the assistant could only helplessly open her mouth, and finally helplessly enter the next room. As for Jiang Hai at this time, he didn't know if he was careless or what, but after he went downstairs and entered the kitchen, he had already forgotten about this matter. Facts proved that Jiang Hai was indeed not the kind of person who liked to think about unrequited love, nor was he the kind of person who liked to think too much. About 10 minutes later, the four women went downstairs, and Jiang Hai had already prepared dinner. Jiang Hai's dinner had a total of 8 dishes. This was also the habit of Huaxia people. 6, 8, 10, these were all very auspicious numbers. 6 was 6, 6 was good luck, 8 was good luck, 10 was 10, 10 was 10, 10 was beautiful. Of course, December's lunar red was also good, 16 was good, 18 was good, but Jiang Hai couldn't make it. So, he only had a total of 8 dishes. The most eye-catching dishes were 2 plates of lobsters and a plate of steamed lobsters. This meter-long lobster lying on the plate was really quite scary. There was also a plate of lobsters baked with cheese, which was made by Mrs. Philemon. In fact, it was also a dish she had just learned after coming here. After all, with the income of a cowboy, even if they bought lobsters, they would only buy small lobsters. Those lobsters could be eaten as snacks, and it was too troublesome to make them with cheese. This was all learned after coming to Jiang Hai. Around the 2 plates of lobsters, there were 6 dishes. Steamed abalone, scallion braised sea cucumber, which was made by Jiang Hai, and fried grouper strips, which was made by taking off the flesh of the grouper and placing it on an iron plate to fry. Generally, this was the way to fry cod strips. Jiang Hai didn't have many opportunities to fry grouper, and this kind of fish tasted best when steamed. But considering that Prawalton and Selena Gomez weren't used to steamed dishes, it wasn't bad to make it this way. In addition to these 3 dishes, there were 3 other dishes. Of course, the main dish, the steak, was divided into 2 portions by Jiang Hai. One portion was a fried steak that could be eaten directly with a fork, and the other portion was a steak like in a Western restaurant, 1 portion per person. These were all specially selected beef, but the ones that were eaten whole with a fork were the worst among the specially selected beef. The good ones were all made like that. In addition to the 2 steaks, there was also a large bowl of vegetable and fruit salad. This was today's dish. And there was also a large bowl of cheddar soup on the side, which was a must-have. Other than that, the main dish was white bread. After these things were arranged, Mrs. Philemon left first, and Jiang Hai's group of 7 stayed to eat. The 7 of them also sat down under Jiang Hai's signal, but there were some rules when they sat down. Jiang Hai naturally sat at the main seat, and the 2 seats beside him were for Delina and Marian. After all, these 2 were also the masters of this place. But next to Delina were Prawalton and Selena Gomez, and next to Marian were Chi Li and her assistant. But after her assistant came downstairs, her original dissatisfaction disappeared. At this time, her eyes were only on the 2 lobsters, the large plate of 2-headed abalone, the large plate of sea cucumber and countless steaks. She suddenly felt that Jiang Hai was quite good. At least she didn't have to worry about not being able to eat good food with him. Since you're all here, sit down and eat. Seeing everyone sit down, Jiang Hai sat at the main seat and smiled at everyone. He was not a Westerner, nor was he a Huaxia scholar. He didn't have anything to be particular about, whether it was others who invited him to eat or he invited others to eat. The most important thing was to feel comfortable and comfortable. Extravagance and etiquette didn't work for him. He didn't want to be controlled by others when he was eating. Jiang Hai, aren't you going to introduce them first? Seeing Jiang Hai picking up the fork to eat the steak, Chi Li couldn't help but cough lightly, then raised her head and looked at Jiang Hai. What's there to introduce? Didn't I introduce them just now? Prawalton, Selena Gomez. Hearing Chi Li's words, Jiang Hai asked with some doubts, but Chi Li rolled her eyes at him, and at the same time, signaled to his side with her eyes. At this time, Jiang Hai remembered that Chi Li wanted him to introduce Delina and Marian. This is Delina Iveline, my adopted daughter. This is her twin sister, Marian Iveline. This is Prawalton, you've met in the morning. She's the god of wealth, who came to give your dad money this time. This is Selena Gomez, haven't you heard her songs before? As for these 2, this is Chi Li, your dad's. Since Chi Li wanted to introduce them, Jiang Hai didn't say much, and directly introduced them at the dining table. It was fine when he first introduced Prawalton, but when he introduced Chi Li, Jiang Hai hesitated a little, because he didn't know what to introduce. It seemed like he only said that she was his friend on the beach just now, so he should call her his friend now. But before Jiang Hai finished his words, Chi Li interrupted Jiang Hai. I'm your mother, his wife. My name is Chi Li. Maybe you've heard him talk about me, maybe you haven't, but it doesn't matter. This is a gift I brought from China. I hope you like it. Listening to Chi Li's standard English pronunciation, Jiang Hai was stunned. Walton and Selena Gomez were stunned. Even Delina and Marian were stunned, including Chi Li's assistant. At this time, countless eyes were looking at her. Chapter 264. However, under the gaze of these people, Chi Li seemed to treat them as air. She just took out 2 wrapped gifts from her bag and deliberately stood up. Then, she placed one gift in front of the 2 girls. President Xi. Looking at the 2 boxes, Chi Li's assistant was a little stunned. Others might not know what those 2 gifts were, but she knew very well that those 2 gifts were not cheap. Moreover, they were custom-made. It could be said that in this world, there were only these 2 things, and there was no third. Originally, the assistant thought that Chi Li prepared them for her mother. Now, it seemed that they were prepared for the 2 girls. However, at this time, not only the assistant was more confused, but Jiang Hai was also more confused. He really wanted to ask this woman what she meant. Was she trying to trick him? However, it was really difficult for him to ask this question. After all, there were outsiders here. Therefore, he just looked at Delina and Marian. At this time, the 2 girls were also a little confused. They didn't understand what was going on. Why did a mother suddenly appear? They knew about the things between Jiang Hai and Chi Li in China, but they didn't know the details. Now it seemed that a mother from China came to find them. Accept it. Although he was a little confused, a little puzzled and a little unhappy, Jiang Hai still nodded. After all, there were outsiders and children here. Jiang Hai couldn't say too much. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Delina and Marian also opened the gift boxes in front of them. This was also the difference between foreigners and Chinese people. After Chinese people received the gift, they didn't open it immediately. Instead, they would wait until they went home to open it. In this way, it was hard to say whether the other party had more money or not. After all, people cared about their face. However, people in the United States were more accustomed to opening the gift and then expressing their love. This also gave the giver a chance to show his face in front of others. Of course, if the gift wasn't good, then showing his face would become a disgrace. However, obviously Chili, who had been in the United States for so long, knew this. In addition, she was very confident in her gift. When the gift boxes were opened, 2 diamond bracelets appeared in front of the 2 girls. Wow, it's so beautiful. These 2 bracelets were obviously designed by a famous designer. It was very likely that it was a limited edition. The base should be platinum, and in the middle of the platinum, there should be 10 diamonds. The main diamond is about 1 carat, and the other 9 diamonds are more than 50 cents. This bracelet's diamond alone is worth about $10,000. In addition to the design fee and the platinum, this bracelet is worth about $20,000. This is the most expensive gift. This is a little too expensive. Jiang Hai glanced at the 2 bracelets. Although he didn't know how much they cost, he knew that they definitely wouldn't be cheap since they were so shiny. Therefore, he said to Chili hesitantly, "Is this for you? It's for the children. Since you agreed to accept it, it has nothing to do with you. Don't look at it first. You can look at it when you go back to your room." However, Chili retorted after hearing Jiang Hai's words. When she saw that Jiang Hai was a little speechless, Chili changed her style and instantly became a good wife and mother. She looked at the 2 girls in front of her and said gently. The 2 girls looked at her, looked at each other, and nodded at her. Then, they gestured a thank you with their hands and put the gift box away. However, they put it behind their chairs like they treasured it very much. Jiang Hai had always been raising these 2 girls according to the principle of adopted daughters. Although he didn't spoil them, it could be said that he spoiled them very much. Except for sleeping with him, he gave them whatever they wanted. Clothes, toys, TVs, game consoles, computers, mobile phones, iPads, and so on. These 2 girls had everything that other people's children had. Moreover, they were all of the best quality. However, Jiang Hai had never bought such expensive jewelry before. Then let's eat first. Seeing that this matter seemed to be over, Jiang Hai sighed helplessly and asked everyone to start eating. As for the assistant that he hadn't introduced, well, who would care about her? As Jiang Hai moved his knife and fork first, everyone started to eat. Jiang Hai cut the beef. Daliana, Marian, and Selena Gomez each got a piece of fish. Compared to beef, Daliana and Marian preferred to eat fish because they often ate fish when they were homeless. Fish was much cheaper than beef, so they had been used to eating it. As for Selena Gomez, she purely wanted to maintain her figure. Since she came to Prawalton, her target was beef. Naturally, she also cut beef. Chili's assistant's eyes didn't leave the lobsters and abalones when they were on the table. Now that the meal started, she immediately got an abalone to eat. This was a wild abalone that had been raised in cold water for many years. Naturally, its taste was much better than those raised in China. Even compared to those in Australia, it was much better than those in China. Whether it was fish or seafood in cold water, due to the environment, they could only grow for a few months in a year. However, they could grow for a year in temperate and tropical areas. Therefore, a fish that lived in temperate or tropical zones for a year would have to live in cold water zones for a few years. The constant stimulation of the cold water made the meat firm and sweet. In terms of taste, the seafood in cold water zones was indeed more delicious than those in temperate or tropical zones. Just like now, although it was the simplest cooking method, the assistant's eyes lit up as soon as she ate it. Compared to her assistant, Chili's first goal was to eat the vegetable salad. However, seeing that her assistant was eating so happily, she ate the cheesy lobster instead. The lobster meat had already been torn, and there was a layer of mozzarella cheese on it. The rich taste of cheese had already drifted in the air. This made the assistant, who hadn't even swallowed the abalone, swallow her saliva crazily. Chili forked the piece of lobster with cheese and put it into her mouth. Her eyes instantly lit up. Oh, delicious. The lobster's taste was a little like that of shrimp, but it was 100 times firmer and dozens of times more delicious. Its meat was fresh and tough. If one used their teeth to tear it, it would be a little troublesome. The cooked lobster already tasted pretty good. Now there was cheese on top. It didn't destroy the original taste of the lobster. Instead, it made the lobster, which was originally fresh, tough, and thick, had an even stronger taste of cheese and milk. It really made people salivate just by looking at it. This lobster is really good, but compared to Jiang Hai's steak, it's a far cry. Looking at the two people eating with grease dripping from their mouths, Selena Gomez also took a small bite and said with a smile, Hearing her words, the two people, who were still fighting over the Abalonian lobster, looked at the steak in front of them with some confusion. To be honest, they had already seen the steak at the first moment. But the appearance of the steak, Jiang Hai didn't care about that when cooking, because it was almost fully cooked. There was inevitably a layer of slightly charred black on top of the steak. Coupled with the black pepper sauce, it could be said that a piece of charcoal was beautified and placed there to deceive a lot of people. Compared to steak, seafood looked much better. Huaxia food was particular about color, fragrance, and taste. The first was color. If the food wasn't good-looking, how could they eat it? Originally, if Selena Gomez was the only one talking, the two people would hesitate for a moment. However, when Chili saw that Prawalton was about to finish the steak in the distance, she knew that there must be something behind the steak. Otherwise, that woman wouldn't be so interested in it. She temporarily put down the other food in her hand and looked at Jiang Hai's steak. She picked up the knife and fork and cut a piece of it. As Chili put the steak in her mouth and bit it, the thick lean meat wrapped in the marbled texture, and the melted fat inside the steak instantly gushed out of her mouth. The beef was firm, fresh, and tender, and it constantly attacked her taste buds and teeth. Once she took a bite of this kind of steak, it was almost impossible to stop her mouth from eating it. Her eyes gradually became a little blurred. In a daze, she seemed to have returned to more than 10 years ago. She still remembered that her whole family went to the capital with her father, because at that time, her father brought back a girl, which made Chili extremely dissatisfied with her father. In order to please his eldest daughter, Chili's father took her to Japan for a trip. In Hyogo County, his father invited her to eat the beef there once. The taste of the beef was exactly the same as the beef she ate today. This is 5A grade beef. Looking at the almost charred beef in front of her, Chili was full of disbelief. Almost to be exact, it should be specially selected grade beef. After all, we are not in Japan, but I believe the quality should not be worse than the Japanese. Hearing Chili's words, Jiang Hai also said with a smile, he is quite confident in his beef. At this time, Prawalton also finished the steak. I think it's time for us to talk about our cooperation. As she put down the knife and fork, she also said to Jiang Hai seriously. Chapter 265. Oh, I'm all ears. To be honest, Jiang Hai had been waiting for her to talk about this for a long time. In fact, in Jiang Hai's opinion, these women were a little redundant. What's the point of having fun? It's better to just do what Mr. Zhang did. How many cows are directly ordered? How much meat is on those cows? How much is slaughtered? How much is exchanged? And that's it. Prawalton still has to come to see and play. Isn't it troublesome? But now, after all, it's a buyer's market. Although Jiang Hai can easily sell these cows, most places like Western restaurants can't accept more than 10,000 cows from Jiang Hai, although Jiang Hai's name has become famous this time. But it's only in New York. No one in the United States or Western United States knows who he is. So if Jiang Hai doesn't want to sell to the middleman at a low price, and he also wants to save trouble, this Prawalton must be caught. Your beef here, to be honest, is better than I expected. If the full score of beef is 100 points, your beef can be 95 points, but now it's only 80 points. The 15 points deducted is because your chef is too bad. If I were you, I would have fired the chef. Raising his index finger, Prawalton said with a serious face. Although she is a bit Shinibu, Sometimes she doesn't go to work, but when it comes to business, she won't joke. Oh, the beef is made by myself. In fact, if a chef really makes a dish like this, in fact, even if Prawalton doesn't say it, Jiang Hai will fire him. But he made it himself, so there is no way to fire him. I already thought about it. Now let's talk about the truth. I haven't carefully looked at the ranch in your manor. I don't know what secret recipes you have, and I'm not interested in knowing. If I want to buy the whole cow, you won't agree, so let's calculate according to the slaughtered cow. After the cow is slaughtered, how much is the meat of each grade? Let's talk about it first. In fact, according to the working principle of Americans, they don't talk about business when eating. So naturally, they don't talk about business. Eating is eating, and there is nothing else mixed in. But Prawalton knows that Jiang Hai is a Huaxia. As a Huaxia who has been in the United States for half a year, it is difficult for him to change the habits of Huaxia. Talking business at the dinner table is also one of the characteristics of Huaxia, so she can cater to his interests. If you can guarantee the quality of your beef cattle here, I can buy all your beef cattle. I think you are in this line of work. You should also know the current market price very well. The average premium grade beef is $375 per pound. The special grade beef is $130 per pound. The best grade beef is $50 per pound. The standard and commercial grade beef is useless to me, but I can also take it. After all, we still have places that sell beef normally in Walmart. The price I give you, you can consider it. I will give you a higher price for the premium grade beef, $380 per pound. The special grade beef is $140 per pound. The best grade beef is $55 per pound. The standard and commercial grade beef is according to the market price. I think you also understand that there is no profit in this. Looking at Jiang Hai, Prawalton casually quoted the price. After listening to her words, Jiang Hai also calculated in his heart. Although his beef cattle will not be as bugged as in the competition, But after these days of farming, he had earned a certain commission for the quality of his beef cattle. According to this price, he could sell one beef cattle for about $120,000 before tax. If he took all the rest, apart from the $2,000 that he had to give to Mr. Zhang, there would still be more than $11,000 left, which would be worth more than $2 billion. This was a big deal. To be honest, Jiang Hai was a little tempted. Wait a minute, the price you said is the price after you want to buy out our beef? But before Jiang Hai agreed, Chili had recovered from the shock and looked at Prawalton seriously. Of course. Seeing Chili looking at her, Prawalton narrowed her eyes and said lightly, I don't think this is a very reasonable price. Chili listened to her words and shook her head. Oh, what's not reasonable? Seeing Chili directly say that it is not reasonable, Prawalton was a little surprised. I can't deny that you want to reserve the rest of the beef. Let's not talk about the price of the beef. Let's not talk about the special selection, the best selection, the standard and the commercial price. The price of the special quality beef is a bit inappropriate. Taking a look at Prawalton, Chili's mind spun rapidly. After all, not long ago, she also lived in the United States for a few years, so she has some understanding of the price of beef. As a rich second generation in China, especially a woman, she knows how cheap beef is in the United States, and how expensive top-grade beef is. Compared with most people in China, who don't know about the grading of beef, Chili at least knows a little about it, although she doesn't know much about it. In general, the special quality beef in the United States is equal to the 4A and 5A grade beef in Japan. But the price of 4A and 5A grade beef is different in Japan. Now Prawalton directly fixed the price, which is obviously to make Jiang Hai confused. Maybe some people will say that it is actually good to fix the price like this, because after all, there is beef better than this standard, and there is beef worse than this standard. But don't forget, there must be a ratio between the two, and the good beef should be much less than the bad beef. For example, Jiang Hai's beef, the retail price of a special grade beef, is more than $375. Even in New York and other places with higher sales costs, it can reach more than $400. Especially good grade 5A beef can even be sold for $420, $430 or more. The price difference between these is not just a few pieces of meat. She doesn't know much about beef, but she is after all a businesswoman. She feels that the price above must be fluctuating. If that's the case, what's the price? Hearing Chi Li's words, Prawalton gently tapped Jiang Hai's long oak table with her hand and looked at Chi Li with a playful look. We still need to discuss this. Didn't you come here to have fun? Then you don't need to be in a hurry. Chi Li knows that at this time, it is not a good thing to reveal the bottom price. Moreover, she doesn't know much about this manner. In the principle of not letting Jiang Hai suffer losses in front of her, she still said very indifferently, "Well, I didn't expect Jiang Hai to be a henpecked man." Looking at Chi Li's domineering look, Prawalton is not in a hurry. Originally, she just gave a tentative price. She really came here to have fun. But she also came here to discuss business. Compared with those who do anything to make money, she is more polite. At least the price she offered is not too outrageous. But since she was seen through by others, she doesn't care. She is not an ordinary businesswoman with a small pattern. She is Prawalton, the person in charge of Sam's Club of the Walmart family. In fact, Chi Li's skill is still far from hers, but she is very interested and continues to watch. Oh, hearing her words, Jiang Hai really doesn't know how to respond. After all, there is no need to make the matter between him and Chi Li known to everyone. So at this time, it is better for him to remain silent. Well, after dinner, is there anything else? Looking at Jiang Hai, Prawalton said with a smile, as if the woman who just returned to the Ice Queen has nothing to do with the woman in front of him. He had to admit that the speed at which this woman changed her face really made Jiang Hai dumbfounded. No. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai said to her very clearly. Hearing Jiang Hai's direct words, Prawalton didn't care. She said hello to the others, especially to Selena Gomez, and then went upstairs. Looking at her appearance, Selena Gomez smiled awkwardly. She is such a person. She is actually a little embarrassed to come with her, but sometimes she can't say it. Well, she is full, but I am not full yet. Everyone continue. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the table that had been paused at this time became lively again. Of course, the main reason is that there is Chi Li's assistant. This girl was really a foodie. Although she was using a fork, which was not her best weapon, she was still invincible on the dining table. Especially after knowing that the steaks were delicious, her fork danced even faster. It is hard to understand how the food is in her stomach. I have to admit that this girl is actually good looking and has a good figure. But eating like this doesn't seem like it. All in all, the meal is still very harmonious. Except for some small mistakes, everything else is within Jiang Hai's expectations. After the meal, Chi Li touched her belly that is already a little round. She took her assistant back to the room, and Selena Gomez also went back to her room. Daliana and Marian also helped Jiang Hai to tidy up, and went back to their room to look at the bracelet. Although they didn't say it, it is obvious that they really liked the gift Chi Li gave them this time. This is also what gives Jiang Hai the most headache. After all, in his opinion, he and Chi Li didn't seem to have reached this point. After tidying up the dinner, Jiang Hai returned to his room and threw his body on the big bed. Then, he rubbed Goldie's head that was not released because there are guests at night. He looked at the ceiling. He has a feeling that this time, Chi Li is very likely to come to talk to him about the matter between them. And according to the fact that she flew so far, it is impossible for her to cut him in half as he wishes. He is afraid that there will be more problems. Chapter 266. Tap 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 tap. The sound of high heels hitting the wooden floor echoed in Jiang Hai's villa. For this sound, whether it was before or now, the people and beasts in Jiang Hai's villa were not used to it. The people who heard this sound were fine. They might not care. But Goldie and Xiao Bai woke up immediately. Feeling the reaction of these two dogs, Jiang Hai also sat up from his sleep. It's not that he remembered, but after all, the incident a while ago didn't happen too long ago. Jiang Hai has to be careful now. After waking up, Jiang Hai took a look at the time. It was only 10:30 in the evening. Although it was completely dark outside, It didn't seem to be the time to sleep. Just now, Jiang Hai was lying in bed, thinking about Qili, and unknowingly fell asleep. As for the TV, it was turned off. Needless to say, Jiang Hai knew that it was Goldie who did it. Now their IQ is no worse than the children at home. Seeing that Jiang Hai fell asleep and turned off the TV, it's not a problem for them. Sometimes, they even help Jiang Hai with the quilt and so on. Of course, that's in winter. With the current temperature, Jiang Hai won't catch a cold, even if he doesn't cover himself with the quilt at night. What's the situation? Shaking his head, Jiang Hai was also a little confused. He listened carefully, and there was indeed the sound of high heels. Knock, knock, knock. Just as Jiang Hai was puzzled, a light knock came from outside the door. Who is it? Although a little curious, Jiang Hai still got up from the bed and asked while walking forward. It's me. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qili's clear voice also came from outside the door. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai's footsteps couldn't help but stop, but he still walked to the door and opened it. Then a neatly dressed Qili appeared in front of him. Oh, it's so late, what's the matter? Looking at Qili, Jiang Hai asked with some doubts. He just fell asleep. You haven't slept yet? If you haven't slept, accompany me for a walk. Although Jiang Hai's words were somewhat puzzled and complaining, Qili didn't seem to hear the meaning of Jiang Hai's words. She still looked at Jiang Hai indifferently and said softly, So late, looking at the sky outside, although it's 10:30, for people in the city, nightlife has just begun. But in Winthrop, to be exact, Zhang's manor, it's already late at night. You don't want me to stand here all the time? Then let's go. But Qili didn't give Jiang Hai a chance to refuse. Instead, she stood there and said to Jiang Hai. Although he was still a little sleepy, Jiang Hai also knew that he really needed to have a good talk with Qili. So after hesitating for a moment, he nodded and closed the door. After about 2 or 3 minutes, when the door opened again, Jiang Hai had already put on his clothes. The two left Jiang Hai's villa one after the other. They walked along the street lamp area set up by Jiang Hai in the manor, and slowly walked towards the beach. One had to admit that the night view of Jiang Hai's manor was actually very good. Because the air was not polluted, walking on the manor's road, one could see the sky full of stars, listen to the sound of the wind, and listen to the sound of the waves being rolled up and slapped on the beach. The street lamps weren't very bright, and the hazy feeling made people feel like they were in a fairy tale world. On the lawn in the distance, groups of fireflies were flying around in the grass, giving people a quiet and comfortable feeling. Jiang Hai and Qili walked side by side here, but one walked on the leftmost side of the road, and the other walked on the rightmost side of the road. The two's pace and breath were almost the same, but there was no trace of the intention to interact. Although such a scenery was beautiful, Jiang Hai was used to it, so now he just yawned and walked forward in a daze. Qili seemed to pay more attention to the scenery she saw along the way. Unknowingly, the two had been walking for more than 10 minutes. The lights in the distant villa were almost too far to see clearly. Jiang Hai gradually calmed down under the blow of the cold wind. Wiping his face, Jiang Hai asked Qili, You called me out, what's the matter? Don't tell me you just want to find someone to accompany you to see the night view. This is one of them. But I called you out because I have something to tell you. But let's make it clear first, no matter what we talk about later, you must not be angry. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qili still looked up at the sky and said indifferently, Okay. Jiang Hai also understands that some things can't be solved by anger. Since she wants to talk, Jiang Hai won't easily lose his temper. The reason why he was so angry last time was because he felt that he was played. But this time, it's in my territory. Want to play with me? How can it be so easy? Let me ask first, did I do anything wrong to you? Hearing Jiang Hai agree, Qili's footsteps stopped. Since walking out of the villa, she faced Jiang Hai for the first time. A pair of big eyes just stood there, staring at Jiang Hai, and said word by word. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai's footsteps couldn't help but stop. No. Thinking about it carefully, although he had a hard time in the previous year, but to be exact, from the beginning, the other party had already made her intentions clear. She and Jiang Hai are not people of the same world. If from the beginning, Jiang Hai didn't consider the relationship between husband and wife, and didn't want to be a toad eating swan meat. He might not be so disappointed. Of course, this is also a bit absolute. Relationship matters are not like business. It's not so back and forth. If it's really like business, then it's fine. Qi Li and Jiang Hai are together just to use Jiang Hai to stabilize the Qi family, and Jiang Hai and Qi Li are together just for the 400,000 yuan to tide over the difficulties. If he had already thought it through before getting married, maybe Jiang Hai wouldn't be as sad as before. It's precisely because she gave him hope and then destroyed it that makes Jiang Hai the most sad. It's also because of this reason that Jiang Hai wants to get rid of this woman so much after having a golden finger. But now when Qi Li asked him what he had done wrong to Jiang Hai really didn't know what to say. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qi Li turned her head and continued to walk forward, and then said slowly, "It's not that easy. Can you tell me why you are so determined to divorce me?" "Because it was a mistake between us. You don't love me. The funny thing is that I used to hope that you might look back at me. But you didn't do so for more than a year, so I woke up. You and I are not people from the same world. Since you don't like me and you don't want to be with me, then I don't want to be with you anymore. I don't like to kiss someone's cold butt." "Oh, I'm sorry, this analogy is not very good." Hearing Qi Li's words, Jiang Hai also spoke slowly. Although he recalled some bitterness in the past, fortunately, he was used to it. "So later, I felt that our marriage was actually a mistake. Instead of this, it's better to break it off directly. You can live the life you are familiar with, find a man who likes you and you like, and can help you in your career. And I will continue to live a lazy life. I feel that this kind of life where we don't interfere with each other is what we need." Gently tapping his heels, Jiang Hai said as he walked forward. "So you made the decision for me?" Still not looking at Jiang Hai, Qi Li walked slowly and spoke slowly. "It's not about who makes the decision for whom. The main thing is that one of us has to take this step. You and I are together for nothing more than to stabilize the Qi Enterprises. Now that the Qi Enterprises has stabilized, I am no longer an important decoration. As for me and you, apart from the naivety and desire of a toad to eat a swan's meat, the main reason is that 400,000 yuan. I'll return the 400,000 yuan to you. If you feel that it's not enough, you can pay me 4 million yuan, 40 million yuan, or even 400 million yuan. Take it as me paying for our relationship." Kicking the pebbles on the road, Jiang Hai was a little excited, but after the excitement, he remembered the agreement between him and Qi Li. He took a deep breath and calmed down again. 400 million yuan? You are really rich." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qi Li smiled softly and said with a serious face, "To tell you the truth, if you want to buy my Prawalton tonight, according to her offer, I can make almost 1 billion yuan, US dollars, after deducting the tax. There will be at least 600 million yuan left. If you want, I can give it all to you." Looking at Qi Li's face, Jiang Hai said sincerely, now that he has spiritual energy, money is actually just a string of numbers for him. Even if he doesn't make a penny this year, he can guarantee that he will make a lot of money next year. He now has such confidence and such strength. "I really didn't expect you to be so rich. I really didn't expect that you would be so much richer than me now. Hee. It seems that my mother's vision was really good back then. She chose you to be my husband at first glance. However, you may be wrong. You and I have known each other for more than 20 years. Although there were more than 10 years in between when we went our separate ways. You should know what kind of person I am. No one doesn't like money, but my desire for money can't override my thinking." Hearing that Jiang Hai could give her 4 billion yuan so easily, Qi Li was also a little surprised. When a man was willing to give all his wealth to a woman, either he loved the woman very much, or he was extremely disappointed with the woman. He would rather use all his wealth in exchange for freedom. Then what do you want? Listening to the meaning of Qi Li's words, Jiang Hai felt that she didn't intend to divorce him. This time, Jiang Hai was also a little helpless. He couldn't help but shake his hand and said to her with some annoyance. However, his appearance didn't scare Qi Li. Instead, Qi Li raised her head and said faintly, "I want you." Chapter 267. The sea breeze blew through Jiang Hai's manor with a faint fishy smell, and the smell of green grass. On the path inside the manor, Jiang Hai and Qi Li stood there, looking at each other. When Jiang Hai heard Qi Li's words, his eyes widened unconsciously. His mouth opened so wide that a fist could be stuffed in. He really didn't expect Qi Li to say that. What does she mean by that? Doesn't she know that I will misunderstand? Cough, I must be thinking too much. She definitely didn't mean that. Looking at Qi Li, Jiang Hai swallowed a mouthful of saliva and forced himself to hide his shocked expression. Then he whispered in his heart, but his eyes unconsciously looked at Qi Li. Tonight, Qi Li was dressed very formally, just like her usual style. She wore a slim-fit woman's suit with a corset waist. It seemed to be a brand, but Jiang Hai didn't know. Inside, she wore a white woman's blouse with flowers. She was wearing a short striped checkered skirt. Of course, this was just for show. She also had a pair of tight-fitting leather pants. Below the leather pants was a pair of women's black high-heeled boots. She looked fashionable, but also had a sense of strictness. Whether you believe it or not, at the beginning, I really didn't mean to give up on you. Although, as you said, the main purpose of marrying you is to stabilize the Qi family. At least I didn't think of having a second marriage. You are my husband, that's all. Not knowing whether it was because of Jiang Hai's expression, or because Qi Li was a little surprised by what she said, she immediately turned around and walked forward, as if she wanted to explain what she had just said. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also turned around and continued to walk with her. But this time, he didn't walk side by side with her. Instead, he deliberately walked half a step behind, because Jiang Hai suddenly didn't know how to face her. Under normal circumstances, he wouldn't refuse a woman who came to him. After all, he wasn't a good person. However, he had to be careful when it came to Qi Li. His sixth sense, well, in fact, it was all senses. He could clearly feel that he was no match for her. It would never be wrong to be careful. Qi Li didn't look at Jiang Hai at this time, and just slowly said her original thoughts. When I married you, I did have some resistance, but it wasn't because of you. It was mainly because my heart was filled with hatred. So the day after the wedding, I returned to the capital. I wanted to consolidate the Qi family. The Qi family can't be destroyed in my hands. I want revenge. If I let the Yin family know that, the Qi family won't be destroyed. Whether it was true or not, Jiang Hai didn't know, so he couldn't interrupt, and just continued to walk with her. I'm not a woman who likes to take credit, but there are some things that I feel it's better to make clear to you. I may have forgotten you, but I've never given up on you, nor have I let you down. In fact, when I called you for the first time, I was also prepared to ask you to come to the capital. Of course, it's not that I'm really unwanted, to the extent that I have to find you to repay you with my body. I'm going to give you a chance to prove yourself. If you prove yourself, we may be the most compatible people in the world. Even if you can't prove yourself, I'm not going to divorce you. To be exact, no matter how bad it is, it will just drag on. In my heart, I've never had the slightest thought of betraying you. Qi Li walked in front and kept talking about her true thoughts. Some of these words were good, some were bad, and some were harsh to Jiang Hai's ears. However, he felt that these words should be true, because even if she wanted to deceive people, she couldn't deceive people completely. Only when it was 30% false and 70% true could she deceive people. Jiang Hai didn't know whether Qi Li was telling the truth or not, but Jiang Hai was willing to listen to her. I don't understand why. I don't understand. Even if you're rich now and don't want to be by my side anymore, don't want me to give you another chance, and don't want to rely on me like this anymore, I don't seem to have any restrictions on you. When we were in Ice City, I saw you in that situation, and I didn't say anything. In the US, let's not talk about you staying obediently. Let's not talk about Prawalton, Selena Gomez, and your 2 daughters. Just the 8 girls in the manor. They have good figures, ages, height, and looks. Let's not talk about you not having any relationship with them. Maybe you don't have any feelings for them, but they have feelings for you. Forget it, it's meaningless to talk about this. It's your business. However, as she spoke, Qi Li's words became a little sour. Hearing Qi Li's words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but feel a little stunned. Was this really Chili, that strong woman? Could it be that she was pretending? It's useless to talk about this. I came here this time to relax. Recently, the air in China isn't very good, so I came here to recuperate. Secondly, and most importantly, I feel that we should sort out our relationship. At this point, Chili looked at Jiang Hai very seriously. Since you don't want me to give you a chance to change your mind, I don't want you to change your mind. Since you don't need me to give you a chance now, and you don't want to change your mind, then let's think of a compromise. I'm not ready for a divorce yet. Moreover, domestic affairs are not as simple as you think. The waters are murky. The title of a married woman is still useful to me, at least when I go to negotiate some contracts. Those people who make things difficult for me will be much less difficult. Therefore, I won't divorce you, but you can rest assured that I have no intention of taking your manor and your money. After I go back, I will ask a lawyer to write a certificate. In the future, I won't take a single cent of your money. I won't interfere too much with your life here, but you can't divorce this marriage. Taking a deep breath, Chili said a lot of words in one breath. Then, she looked at Jiang Hai and said with a serious face. She knew that the relationship between her and Jiang Hai was indeed a little delicate. It was impossible for her to come and beg Jiang Hai softly. However, if she didn't make it clear, then Jiang Hai would really force her to divorce him. She didn't know if Jiang Hai was afraid or for other reasons. Anyway, now Jiang Hai was eager to get rid of her. However, after Qi Li's investigation, she found that Jiang Hai didn't live with anyone else. Secondly, he didn't have a girlfriend. This wasn't because of a change of heart that made him determined to divorce her. As long as no one stirred up trouble, based on her understanding of Jiang Hai, she was confident that she could convince Jiang Hai. Sure enough, after hearing her words, Jiang Hai was a little hesitant. Just like Chili said, Jiang Hai was in a hurry to divorce her, not because he wanted to start a new relationship. To be honest, the only thing he had in mind was Scheit Clive. The other women were just SOZO. Jiang Hai wouldn't give up his feelings for them. It was probably the same for the other women. The reason why he wanted to say goodbye to Lu Li as soon as possible was because he was a little angry at the beginning. Secondly, he felt that he had waited for too long, and it wasn't worth it. However, just like Chili said, she didn't know him anything and didn't do anything to let him down. She also didn't have any thoughts about his manner or his money. At the same time, she didn't care about his private life. As long as he didn't divorce her, everything else was fine. Since Chili had already said so, Jiang Hai really didn't have anything else to say. She had already made it clear that this identity was still useful to her. Jiang Hai didn't really want to force her. This wasn't his style. Therefore, looking at Chili beside him, Jiang Hai sighed. He felt that sometimes he was too soft-hearted. After hesitating for a moment, Jiang Hai looked at Qi Li and said slowly, "If you really want to sign the contract, then I'll consider it. However, I have to say the ugly words first. After all, I'm also going to get married. Although I don't have a clear partner yet, I'm not young anymore. I have to think about my own future." Although he was a very stubborn person, but sometimes his ears were soft. Before, Qi Li had refused to leave, so Jiang Hai thought that his little secret had been discovered. That's why she insisted on staying by his side. Now, after listening to her words, although he didn't know whether it was true or not, Jiang Hai still decided to do so. But even though his heart had already decided, although he had already made up his mind, he couldn't admit it so easily. It had to be said that sometimes men were so forgetful. Jiang Hai didn't think about the disdain he had received in the past, and the suffering of being alone in an empty room. Although now it seemed that even if she wanted to come over and recommend herself, Jiang Hai still had to reconsider. However, if she really didn't want to divorce him, no matter what the reason was, Jiang Hai really didn't want to be too ruthless. "Phew, I didn't expect you to be so considerate. Thank you very much. I originally thought that I might have to pay some price." Although Jiang Hai didn't say it clearly, Qi Li had already understood. She turned her head and said to Jiang Hai with a smile. The strong and serious expression on her face was like winter snow at this time. This was the first time Jiang Hai saw Qi Li's smiling face since she was a child. Under the fireflies, starlight, moonlight, and hazy street lights, it was really beautiful. What do you want to pay? What can you pay? Looking at her, Jiang Hai asked subconsciously. But when he asked, he regretted it a little. This sentence was obviously a little flirtatious. Sure enough, Chili didn't answer, but snorted softly and walked quickly toward the road ahead. But at this moment, a low whimper came into Jiang Hai's ears. Chapter 268. Woo. But just as Jiang Hai was filled with emotion, a low whimper passed into Jiang Hai's ears. When he reacted, he only saw a pair of green eyes. At this time, they suddenly emerged from the lawn behind Chili. At the sight of these green eyes, Jiang Hai's heart subconsciously thumped. He wasn't superstitious enough to believe that there were demons and ghosts. However, there were green eyes in the lawn and a whimpering sound. Needless to say, there must be a beast in the lawn. Green eyes meant that the animal had night vision. Although there were no lions or tigers in North America, there were still many creatures with night vision. For example, the largest canine, the North American gray wolf, jaguar, puma, bear, and so on. But at this time, the North American gray wolf had been extinct for some time. Even if there were wild ones now, they were only in Yellowstone Park. It was unlikely to appear here. Jaguars were similar to the North American gray wolf. They had disappeared for a long time. Maybe there were still some in the Amazon jungle, but they definitely couldn't be seen in Boston. According to Jiang Hai's estimation, it couldn't be a bear, because the size of a bear was obviously impossible to hide in the grass. Jiang Hai still couldn't see it, so he ruled it out. Coupled with the legends he had heard before, the only possibility in Boston was a creature with night vision and a similar size. There was only one kind, puma, which was a mountain lion. There was once a mountain lion that went down the mountain and was shot dead by the police. When he bought the fur coat, Jiang Hai still remembered the shop assistant's words very clearly. If there was no accident, then this pair of green eyes should belong to this kind of beast. Be careful. Thinking of this, Jiang Hai had already rushed over, and the powerful explosive force was used in an instant. Before Chili could react, she was pulled into Jiang Hai's arms, and she was stunned for a moment. This was the first time a man had taken the initiative to pull her into his arms. In the past, even when she was dating in Zhongwu, she was always in the position of absolute initiative. Things like throwing herself into his arms, let alone doing it, she didn't even think about it. The two had been dating for 3 years. When they walked together in the first year, the distance between them was half a meter. In the second year, they could walk side by side on the road. Maybe it was because Chili didn't believe in men and marriage, because her father gave birth to her second sister. So it was really difficult for her to walk into any strange man's heart. In the third year, they would look at the phone or hold hands while shopping. In Chili's eyes, this had already reached the point of marriage, but before they could talk, something happened. It could only be said that In Zhongwu was really a sad person. But today her first time was buried in Jiang Hai's hands. However, Jiang Hai hugged her quickly, but he threw her even faster. Before she could react, Jiang Hai had already hugged her and spun her around in a circle, then threw her behind him. Then, there was a bang sound, and Chili's butt and the hard ground had an intimate contact, making her frown and grimace in pain. Just as she was about to ask Jiang Hai what was wrong with him, she saw a ferocious beast slowly walking out of the bushes. This beast looks like a lioness, but it looks slightly smaller than a lion. Under the hazy street lights, it looks very beautiful, but at the same time, it is also very hazy. But because of the night vision, its eyes are green, and the sharp and long canine teeth in its mouth means that it is definitely not a good thing. Jiang Hai is also standing here at this time staring at it. Sure enough, it's this thing. Looking at his opponent, Jiang Hai's eyes narrowed, his body unconsciously arched, and his hands vigorously spread out, trying to make himself look bigger. This looked ridiculous to humans, but in nature, it was very useful. Making oneself look bigger was the only way to survive in nature. Jiang Hai didn't learn this, but it was as if he was born with it in his mind. He felt that it might be related to the tattoos on his body. Sure enough, seeing Jiang Hai's actions, the mountain lion, which was originally testing the waters, couldn't help but stop and look at Jiang Hai with some vigilance. Jiang Hai also looked at it with vigilance. The man and the beast looked at each other like this, looking for any opportunity to destroy. When the man and the beast stood still, Jiang Hai also put his hand in his mouth, and a clear whistle came out of his mouth. Hearing this whistle, the mountain lion opposite him was stunned, but when it heard the sound coming from the villa area in the distance, it knew that the human in front of it was calling for an accomplice, which made the mountain lion extremely angry. At that moment, it couldn't care less. Its body naturally crouched down, its hind legs kicked, opened its bloody mouth, and bit at Jiang Hai. Unfortunately, this guy chose the wrong opponent. Jiang Hai looked at the mountain lion pouncing on him. Instead of retreating, he moved forward. The first thing he did was to let go of his head. The mountain lion's pounce was very clever. It was equivalent to 3 strikes. The first was to use its body to knock the opponent down. If it didn't knock the opponent down, the second was to use its claws to firmly nail the opponent's flesh. If the claws were pulled out, there would be a bloody hole. This was to injure the opponent, and also to stabilize its body. If the claws were fixed, the third move would be to bite. It wouldn't bite other places but the throat and kill in one blow. The speed and explosive power of a mountain lion were naturally faster than that of a human. Even if a person's reaction speed was extremely fast, it wouldn't be easy to dodge the pouncing attack of a mountain lion if it hadn't reached the limit. In other words, it was at the level of professional training. However, Jiang Hai wasn't an ordinary person after all. If he hadn't leveled up and encountered this mountain lion, he might have been able to dodge, but it was inevitable that he would be scratched and be at a disadvantage. However, now that his physical fitness was twice that of an ordinary person's, Jiang Hai could react. His brain could react, give orders, and his body could follow. His explosive power wasn't weaker than this lion's. Jiang Hai instantly dodged the pouncing attack of the lion and directly dived under the lion's stomach. Then, Jiang Hai directly punched the mountain lion's stomach with a rising dragon punch, causing the mountain lion to lose its balance in midair. Its body turned and fell heavily to the side. However, if a mountain lion was so easy to deal with, it wouldn't be a mountain lion. After landing, it scratched twice with its claws and was about to stand up and fight again. However, Jiang Hai wouldn't give it a chance to fight again. Just now Jiang Hai tested it. Compared to this mountain lion, his physical fitness was twice that of a human's. There were advantages and disadvantages. In terms of strength, he naturally had the advantage. However, in terms of agility, explosive power, and speed, although he had some advantages, the advantages weren't very obvious. If he continued fighting like this, he could win, but he couldn't avoid being scratched and scratched. After all, he wasn't carrying a weapon at this time, so taking advantage of its weakness and killing it was a very important strategy. When animals were at their weakest, that was when they lost their balance. Therefore, before the mountain lion could get up, Jiang Hai had already pounced on its body. His legs instantly clamped on its stomach, and his hands wrapped around its neck. He kept exerting force, trying to subdue this guy. However, Jiang Hai had underestimated it. Although Jiang Hai was holding it in place, the mountain lion was still struggling and rolling on the ground. It wanted to throw Jiang Hai off, so much so that Jiang Hai's hands, which were wrapped around its neck, couldn't exert any strength. Looking at the dust flying in front of her, Chili was completely dumbfounded. She didn't know what to say. Her eyes were filled with the scene of the battle between Jiang Hai and the mountain lion. She never thought that Jiang Hai would be so strong. Suddenly, she realized that she didn't seem to know much about Jiang Hai. He knew how to raise cows and fish, and he had the ability to get the Walton family to come over and talk about cooperation with him. He could fight with such a lion bare-handed. At least, she didn't even dare to think about such a thing in the past. Unknowingly, she had started to care about Jiang Hai because her toy had been stolen. Unknowingly, she felt that Jiang Hai had slowly walked into her heart. Just as she was in a daze, 2 figures suddenly flew past her. It was because of these 2 figures that she came back to her senses. When she looked at the center of the field, She saw that the two huge dogs she had seen outside Jiang Hai's room had already joined the battle. These two big dogs, any one of them is actually not smaller than the lion over there. In a one-on-one fight, the lion may not be a match, let alone a group of them. Moreover, there is Jiang Hai on his back. He wanted to scare off the two dogs here. However, just as it bared its teeth, the big gray wolf, Goldie, had already slapped it hard on the head. Goldie's sharp claws instantly opened 3 wounds on its face. Blood was already flowing out, and its flesh was also torn open. As for the big black dog, Xiaobai, it rushed to the mountain lion's hind leg and bit it. Fortunately, the mountain lion was very smart. At the critical moment, it swept its tail and didn't directly bite the leg bone. Otherwise, with Xiaobai's bite force, it would be crippled in the future. Even so, when Xiaobai raised its head, it still took a big piece of meat from its thigh. A dog that bites doesn't bark, and a dog that barks doesn't bite. Although this sentence wasn't absolute, it seemed to make some sense now. Roar, roar. The pain and deterrence caused by the two dogs made the mountain lion panic and roar loudly. Chapter 269. Opportunity. However, its cry was an opportunity for Jiang Hai, who had been behind it the whole time. Jiang Hai's eyes lit up, and he exerted force with both hands. This time, the mountain lion did not have time to resist. It was firmly pressed under Jiang Hai's body. Feeling the power from Jiang Hai and the two vicious dogs beside it, the mountain lion, which had little strength left, surrendered this time. Other than gasping for breath, it did not move anymore. At this time, Robbins, Bell, Edward Anderson, and all the men in Jiang Hai's manor ran over with guns and cannons. Even Pra Walton, Selena Gomez, and Chi Li's assistant, who had not come out yet, ran over. Especially the assistant. She was obviously frightened at this time. After all, for Pra Walton and the others, guns were not prohibited in the United States. They were very calm when they saw guns. There must be something in the manor that required guns. Otherwise, it would be impossible to mobilize so many people. However, Chi Li's assistant had never seen such a scene. She even suspected that a war was about to break out. However, when she came over and found her general manager sitting on the ground, she immediately rushed over and helped her up. Following Chi Li's gaze, she saw a lion lying on the ground at this time. Jiang Hai and the two dogs surrounded the lion in the middle. For some reason, she suddenly felt that the lion was a little pitiful. It's a cougar. A cougar actually entered the manor. Seeing the animal under Jiang Hai, the people here could not help but feel a little surprised. Especially Belle and Marin Rupert. Their faces were a little ugly. After all, they were responsible for patrolling the border. It was their responsibility to steal fish, and it was also their responsibility to invade from land. In the past, there were no helicopters, so there was no way to patrol so many times. But now that there are helicopters, they actually missed something. This is unacceptable for them. Hurry up and get a cage and put it in. Seeing that everyone was a little hesitant, Jiang Hai ordered loudly, "Boss, this guy invaded our manor. Let's just kill it." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Belle's tone carried a trace of anger. A mountain lion entered the manor. This was his responsibility. Now he just wanted to kill this guy to remind himself and vent his anger at the same time. Don't kill it first. I remember that this thing should be a protected animal. Let's catch it first. After thinking about it for a while, Jiang Hai decided that killing this guy was quite tempting. Not only could he taste the mountain lion meat, but he could also get a body of mountain lion skin. However, considering that the population of these guys wasn't very developed, and that he had to do business recently, he decided to do a good deed. So, Jiang Hai decided to pack it up first and think about it later. Hearing that Jiang Hai has already spoken, Belle and Robbins had to return to the manor and bring a cage that Jiang Hai used to store Xiao Bai and Xiao Huang. It's unknown whether this mountain lion is really weak, or it has already admitted defeat. After Jiang Hai left, it did not struggle too much. Instead, it was really carried into the cage by Jiang Hai and others. What do we do next? Robbins asked in a low voice as he looked at the mountain lion lying there alone after entering the cage. Feed it something. Then I'll call the police station and ask. After thinking for a while, Jiang Hai patted the soil on his body and said to Robbins. Then, he took out his phone from his pocket and called the police station. The police station was also surprised after learning that Jiang Hai caught a mountain lion alive. But according to the police station, this matter was actually not under their jurisdiction. If the mountain lion broke into the homestay and killed it, it was under their jurisdiction. But now that it has been caught, it was under the jurisdiction of the Wildlife Conservation Center. However, Winthrop is not a big town after all. Therefore, the Wildlife Conservation Center was actually located together with the Stray Pet Center. At this time, the center was already closed. Since Jiang Hai had already caught this thing, he would have to trouble him to send this thing to the town tomorrow. Hearing the police's words, Jiang Hai didn't care. After saying a few words, he hung up the phone. Then, everyone worked together and carried the mountain lion into Jiang Hai's villa. Then Jiang Hai drove everyone back. It was late at night, and everyone was tired after coming out. It was better to go back and rest early. As for the sisters in Jiang Hai's villa, they were also driven back to sleep by Jiang Hai. Prawalton and Selena Gomez didn't need Jiang Hai to tell them to go upstairs to sleep. Only Chi Li and her assistant stayed here. What can I do for you? Looking at Jiang Hai, who was squatting in front of the cage and still observing the animal, Chi Li hesitated and asked Jiang Hai. But when she asked, her face was a little red. It's okay, didn't we finish talking about our business? You go back to sleep, it's okay. However, Jiang Hai was clearly a person who didn't understand a girl's thoughts. So he just waved his hand and continued to stare at the mountain lion. Oh, I see, okay then. Seeing that Jiang Hai didn't seem to want her help, Chi Li couldn't help but stroke her hair a little disappointedly, then went upstairs with her assistant. But at this time, Jiang Hai didn't consider Chi Li's thoughts at all. His eyes were staring at the mountain lion, and the mountain lion was also staring at him. He had to admit that sometimes beasts had much better intuition than humans. Although it dared to confront Jiang Hai just now, at this time, the mountain lion was much more obedient. It just stayed there and looked at Jiang Hai cautiously. Regarding its gaze, Jiang Hai was quite satisfied. Then he stood up, went to get a basin of water for it, and went to the warehouse to get a piece of meat for it. This is a real ferocious beast. It's my first time seeing it and catching it, so I'm a little excited. Looking at the guy in front of him, Jiang Hai muttered softly. He finally understood why those rich people liked to hunt and hunt so much. It was because catching these beasts was indeed something to be proud of. Let's take a look at it before it's sent to town. Thinking of this, Jiang Hai directly sat on the ground. His house wasn't dirty, and the floor was cleaned by Aphrodite and the others every day. He just stared at the mountain lion like this with wistful eyes. As for the mountain lion, it didn't care about Jiang Hai's gaze. It was still lying in the cage, chewing on the meat and drinking some water from time to time. At this time, Chi Li, who had returned to the second floor, took one last look at Jiang Hai, who was still playing with the lion on the first floor, and couldn't help but mutter softly, "Blockhead." Then, she quickly walked to her room. CEO Chi, did you just say something? Chi Li's assistant, who was originally a little confused, vaguely heard Chi Li mutter something. However, she didn't hear it clearly, so she immediately asked, "No, you heard wrong." Hearing her words, Chi Li naturally had to flatly deny. CEO Chi, should we change our itinerary? This place is really too scary. Not only are there lions, did you see that just now? Everyone here has a gun. That big beard is holding a gun. It's too scary. Is Jiang Hai really raising cows? Why do I feel like he set up a government armed force here? Hearing Chi Li's words, the assistant immediately took a step forward with a frightened expression. At the same time, she whispered to Chi Li, her eyes flashing, "Are you willing to part with the food here? I still remember that during dinner, those 2 lobsters, those abalones and those beef. TSK. Hearing her words, Chi Li didn't stop walking. As she walked, she said with a smile, Then let's have another meal before we leave." Hearing Chi Li mention dinner, the assistant became uncertain again. After hesitating for a long time, she finally stomped her feet, gritted her teeth, and said as if she had accepted her fate. However, Chili was too lazy to pay attention to her at this time. She walked back to her room and closed the door. She went to the bathroom to take a shower again, then threw herself on the big bed. At this time, it was almost 12 o'clock at night, but she didn't feel sleepy at all. Looking at the ceiling, she seemed to see the night when Jiang Hai hugged her and spun in circles to escape from the mountain lion's bloody mouth. Everything in those few seconds was as beautiful as a painting, except for the last moment. That guy is really a block of wood, but he's quite cute. I didn't expect that the hero saving the damsel in distress that I originally despised and thought was the most melodramatic was actually quite romantic when it was performed. If Jiang Hai hadn't made her fall, if Jiang Hai had asked her to stay with him on the first floor, if Jiang Hai had raised his head and gently said, "Are you all right?" After subduing the mountain lion, Jiang Hai had raised his head and gently said, "Are you all right?" That was such a pleasant thing to do. But unfortunately none of these happened. But for Chili, even if none of these happened, tonight was already perfect. However, while she was happily sleeping, some people couldn't fall asleep. Bang! A glass bottle fell to the marble floor. And Zhang Wu, who had been trying to win back Chili, was now drunk in his living room. And in front of him in the dining room, there were several photos of Chi Li and her assistant getting off the plane in Boston. Photos of Chi Li and her assistant going to Jiang Hai's manor, and so on. Although there were no photos in the manor, it was obvious that a mature and beautiful woman took the initiative to throw herself into the arms of her nominal husband. There was no need to explain what would happen next. Chapter 270. I'm really grateful for your contribution to nature. This mountain lion is already pregnant. It probably felt the lack of resources in the mountains, and the pressure of life was too great, so it entered human society. Looking at the mountain lion in the cage in front of her, the girl standing beside Jiang Hai spoke softly to Jiang Hai with a face full of affection. Last night, Jiang Hai looked at the mountain lion until past midnight before he lost his curiosity and went back to his room to sleep. After waking up this morning, the mountain lion had almost recovered. The recovery ability of wild animals was much stronger than that of domesticated animals. And this mountain lion was the same. After a night of recovery, in addition to water, food, and heating, the wound on the mountain lion's face caused by Xiao Bai had already formed a scar, and the piece of meat on its hind leg that was bitten off by Xiao Bai had also improved a little. Although Jiang Hai did not inject spirit energy into it, the beef in Jiang Hai's manor was nourished by a certain amount of spirit energy after all. Therefore, after the mountain lion ate the meat, its body improved a lot. Early this morning, he drove the mountain lion to the stray pet center in Winthrop with Robbins. This mountain lion would stay here for a while, and then Boston would send someone to bring it back to Boston or release it back to the Alabama mountains. With the current protection of the Alabama mountains in the United States, the chances of sending it back were higher than keeping it. Moreover, this mountain lion was an expectant mother at this time. Today was the best opportunity to restore the ecological balance. This is nothing. Hearing the girl's words, Jiang Hai smiled and waved his hand. In fact, he had always liked ferocious beasts. In the past he did not have the opportunity to raise them, but now, it was not easy to raise them. This may seem nothing to you, but it maintains the ecological balance. Hearing Jiang Hai's nonchalant words, the girl also smiled. This was not the first time this girl and Jiang Hai had met. When Jiang Hai had come to adopt a dog, this girl had also received him. She and Jiang Hai could be considered acquaintances, but Jiang Hai still did not know her name. Listening to her words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but stand up and look at the girl beside him. This girl is a typical American girl about 1.7 meters tall. She doesn't look very old, has long blonde hair, and some small freckles on her face. She is very cute. Looking at the girl's eyes, Jiang Hai chuckled and slowly said, "If you really want to thank me then, let me adopt that brown bear." At first, when she heard the first half of Jiang Hai's sentence, the girl thought that Jiang Hai was asking her out. However, when she heard the second half of the sentence, the girl was stunned. "Get out." Very straightforward words were said to Jiang Hai. Hearing what the girl said, Luo Binsi, who had been following behind Jiang Hai and the girl, could not help but shrug. My boss really doesn't know how to pick up girls. In this way, although Jiang Hai and Luo Binsi were not kicked out, they were politely asked to leave. After leaving the stray pet center, Jiang Hai could not help but touch his nose. Compared to the mountain lion, he was more interested in raising a bear. Of course, it was because there were no tigers here. If there were tigers, he would also want to raise tigers. Thinking about the Arabian tycoons he had seen before, they raised lions, tigers, and leopards for fun. He was just envious at the beginning. Now that he had the capital to raise this thing, plus he had a special way to make these guys obedient, his heart was wild. Just as Jiang Hai was struggling there was a sudden knocking sound from the front. What's the situation? Is someone organizing a parade in the town? Hearing the music coming from the front, Jiang Hai asked curiously. Oh, today is the Poseidon ritual. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Luo Binsi also took a look, but he knew what was going on with a glance, so he told Jiang Hai. Poseidon ritual? Hearing Luo Binsi's words, Jiang Hai was stunned. He really had not heard of this thing. Seeing Jiang Hai's curious look, Luo Binsi explained to Jiang Hai. After all, Winthrop was located by the sea. Because the land was not very rich, from the beginning, the eastern states here mainly relied on fishing for a living. Fishing, of course, they had to pray every year. When the fishing was rich, they also had to pray that the Poseidon would not be angry at any time, and would not flood this place. Although when the United States appeared, it was no longer the time when feudal superstitions were mainstream. But sometimes people were like this. They would rather believe in something than not. For example, Catholicism. Now the believers in the United States can be said to be the most in a single country. Of course, the proportion may not be as high as Europe, because there are too few people in European countries. But in any case, the Poseidon ritual was still very popular here. This ceremony was just a ceremony from the very beginning. Everyone in the town would come to the seaside before summer and pray for good weather next year. Then, they would send some offerings such as meat and throw them into the sea. That was the end of the ceremony. The reason why this time was chosen was because summer was the time when the storm was the most violent. People who lived by the sea would know very well that generally speaking, typhoons or storms were the most frequent in summer. It was rare in spring, autumn, and winter, so this ritual was also chosen at this time. But in recent decades, this ritual had been regarded as a festival in Winthrop Town. Every year at this time, the town would have a band organize a parade. The parade would start from the town and end at the seaside. In the middle, there would be residents of the town joining in, making the whole scene very lively. When they arrived at the seaside and presented the sea god's gift, the ceremony would be considered complete. At this time, people would spontaneously organize a small market by the seaside. They could go there to exchange for some old appliances or other things that they needed. You could use money to buy or exchange things. In short, it was a flea market. After hearing Robin's introduction, Jiang Hai, who originally wanted to go back, was not in a hurry. He called back and asked Pra Walton, Selena Gomez, and Chile if they wanted to come. After knowing that they were not interested, Jiang Hai went by himself. It was understandable. If he asked these women if they wanted to go to the department stores in Boston to shop for luxury goods, they would definitely be interested. But going to a flea market? Haha, it was just SOSO. Let's go, Robbins. Let's go and have a look. Seeing the parade slowly walk in, Jiang Hai waved at Robbins and motioned for him to join the crowd. Since they were here to have fun, naturally, it would be fun to join the crowd. I won't go. I'll drive directly to the parking lot by the sea. Otherwise, I won't feel at ease leaving it here. However, when he heard Jiang Hai's words, Robbins shook his head. He was not at ease with the F-750, although in the eyes of others, this car was just a good pickup truck. In his view, it was only 1/3 of the ranch. It was hard for anyone who wasn't a cowboy to understand their love for cows, horses, and pickup trucks. Jiang Hai saw that he really didn't want to come, so he could only shrug his shoulders and then join the parade. In fact, the parade was just following the flow of people around. Many of the residents in the town knew Jiang Hai, But Jiang Hai was really low-key. He hardly interacted with the residents of the town. So many people knew about him. However, there were only a dozen people who could talk to him. They were the owners and employees of the Italian restaurant, as well as the owners and employees of several supermarkets. That was all. So after he joined the crowd, although people didn't say anything, they didn't communicate with him. The people in the United States were actually not as lively as imagined. If you were a tourist or filming something, they would come over enthusiastically and share their joy with you. But for familiar strangers like Jiang Hai, they would still keep a distance, but Jiang Hai didn't care about this. He just moved from time to time in the crowd. But it didn't take long for him to be squeezed from the front to the middle of the parade. As soon as he reached the middle, he met an acquaintance, the mayor of Winthrop Town, Mayor Wallace, who has met Jiang Hai a few times. Hey Jiang Hai, you also participated in the parade. Seeing Jiang Hai, Mayor Wallace, who was holding a water tank at this time, said with a smile, "Hey Mr. Mayor, I caught a mountain lion last night and sent it to the town. I just saw you marching here, so I came to join in the fun." Hearing the voice of Mayor Wallace, Jiang Hai also leaned over and explained the reason for his appearance here. "Oh, I heard about this from others. You are really amazing, you can catch a mountain lion alive. You know that is our top predator here." Hearing what Jiang Hai said, Mayor Wallace also nodded. He also heard about it in the morning. "Mayor, what are you holding? Do you want me to help you?" Hearing Mayor Wallace's words, Jiang Hai was a little embarrassed. After all, he couldn't explain the specific situation of the mountain lion he caught. So he wisely changed the topic. Looking at the big fish tank in Mayor Wallace's arms, Jiang Hai asked with some surprise, "Hey no, this fish tank can't be easily held by others. Only I, the mayor, can hold it. Haha, this is a gift for the sea god." Hearing Jiang Hai words, Mayor Wallace said with a smile, "A gift for the sea god?" Hearing Mayor Wallace's words, Jiang Hai looked inside with some surprise, because he remembered that Robbins and the others said that the gifts for the sea god were some meat and the like. What does this fish tank mean? With a curious mind, Jiang Hai stretched his head forward, and Mayor Wallace also cooperated with him to move forward, so that he could see more clearly. Chapter 271. Don't say, the distance was too far. The aquarium tank was transparent, and Mayor Wallace was wearing blue clothes today, so Jiang Hai couldn't see it clearly. Now that he was closer, Jiang Hai discovered that there was something in the aquarium tank. This thing is mainly blue in color. It is only about 3 or 4 centimeters long, and there are white lines on its body. It looked like a blue and white stripe with 6 huge flower beds growing on its body. It looked really beautiful and mysterious. Subconsciously, Jiang Hai stretched out his hand and wanted to touch this thing. However, Jiang Hai's hand just stretched out, and he was stopped by Mayor Wallace. Sorry, I really haven't seen this little thing. It looks really beautiful. If you don't look carefully, you will really ignore this little thing. But this thing looks really good. It's not that I don't want you to touch it, but this thing is highly poisonous. They eat jellyfish as food, and there are many kinds of jellyfish toxins in their body. If you are poisoned by it, it is almost impossible to live, because no one knows what kind of poison you are poisoned with. Looking at Jiang Hai, Mayor Wallace said seriously. He remembered that Jiang Hai has a fishing ground. This kind of dangerous creature, although rare in the United States coastal area, occasionally occurs. If you are stung, it will be troublesome. So powerful. What is this thing? A sea slug? When he heard Mayor Wallace's words, Jiang Hai was also shocked and withdrew his hand. It seems that the law of nature is really like that. Those who are good-looking are not to be trifled with. It is a kind of sea slug. This thing is called the blue dragon, also known as the sea swallow. Its scientific name is the Atlantic sea god slug. Hearing that Jiang Hai was quite interested in this thing, Mayor Wallace said to Jiang Hai while walking, "The origin of this creature's name is the name of the sea god Glaucos in ancient Greek mythology." Did someone say that the god of the sea in Greek mythology was not Poseidon? However, Poseidon was the emperor of the sea, while Glaucus was just a sea god. There was a difference in their levels. According to legend, Glaucus was originally an ordinary fisherman, But one day, he found a kind of herb that could bring the dead back to life. Then, his spirit of seeking death was vaguely activated. After eating this herb, he turned into a merman, half human and half fish. He was divided into 3 forms. The left side was a human, and the right side was a fish. Above him was the lower half of a human, below him was the lower half of a fish, and above him was the human head, and below him was the fish head. I digressed. In the end, he wasn't really a good story. The main myths and stories about him were his love triangle with Skylar the water fairy and Kirch the witch. However, in 1777, when European scientists discovered the Poseidon slug for the first time, they borrowed his name, Poseidon. Over the years, this kind of slug was found in many places, including Africa, Europe, Australia, and Mozambique. There were traces of this kind of slug, not only in the Atlantic Ocean, but also in the Pacific Ocean. However, people were used to calling it Poseidon in the Atlantic Ocean, because this kind of creature could *ck itself, mate, and reproduce. The population was not small. Therefore, even though this kind of creature was very poisonous, many people were willing to keep it as pets because of its beautiful appearance. Of course, Winthrop Town didn't have so much money. Although Jiang Hai felt that this thing was quite beautiful, to be honest, he still preferred beasts. Therefore, he was just asking for fun. If he went to the sea in the future, he would avoid this thing when he saw it. He couldn't afford to provoke it. When Mayor Wallace explained the origin of this blue dragon, they had unknowingly walked from the town to the beach. At this time, a lot of people had gathered on the beach, including Luo Binsi, who drove here. In addition, there were many people gathered here. On the beach, there were a lot of small tents and tents. There were a lot of old goods inside. These were the things that would be used for trading in a while. Jiang Hai also glanced at them when he left. Most of them were abandoned appliances and the like. In the US, it was very troublesome to deal with old home appliances. You can't just throw them away. Every old home appliance had to be dismantled and sent to the processing plant. Some of them had to be recycled, and they even had to pay for it. This was very difficult for the lazy Americans to accept, but the punishment here was too heavy. If you were found to be littering, not only would you have to pay less, you might even go to jail. Therefore, in the United States, there were always a lot of old goods. Some people wouldn't throw away the old things after they replaced them with new ones. Because it was troublesome, most of them would be piled up at the door or in the warehouse. If a homeless person took a fancy to it, they could directly take it away. If it was newer, at least some old goods with some value would be sent to this kind of old goods market. Jiang Hai glanced around. There were a lot of things here. There were old appliances, refrigerators, televisions, washing machines, air conditioners, water heaters, and so on. There were old game consoles and all kinds of things. There were PS, PDAs, Xbox, and even the legendary Hongbai. There were old clothes, down jackets, even fur coats, some cloth, small ornaments, old books, old cups, old computers, and so on. It was almost like a department store. As long as you wanted to buy something, you could find it here. However, the premise was that these things were worthless and shabby. While Jiang Hai was looking here, Mayor Wallace had already walked to the front of the stage. After reciting a verse loudly, he poured the fish tank in his hand into the sea. The blue dragon that was caught also swam into the sea. With the cheers of the crowd, the ceremony was over. What was left was time to exchange information. Jiang Hai also told Rabinsi at the first time, and plunged into the old goods market. However, Jiang Hai wouldn't let his stomach suffer. Before visiting this old goods market, he specially bought a taco. He ate it while walking and looking at the various things around him. For Jiang Hai, he actually didn't lack anything. Although Moses Adams was recently filing taxes for Jiang Hai, he didn't have any income since he took over the fishery last October. He only paid. If he didn't pay, it meant that the national and state taxes didn't exist. After all, taxes could only be deducted if there was income. If there was no income, then there was no tax to be deducted. Jiang Hai's gold coins were privately traded and were not included in the tax. Of course, if he took the initiative to report it, then the American government would be very happy. However, if the American government was happy, then the British government might have problems. After all, the gold coins that Jiang Hai salvaged were British gold coins, so there were many things in between. Jiang Hai wasn't stupid. He didn't have to pay taxes. He didn't have to pay sales tax or income tax. The only thing he had to pay was the local tax. However, because he took over in October, he only had to pay for half a year. Also, because Jiang Hai raised cattle, which was considered to stimulate local development, this tax would be reduced a little. Jiang Hai hired more than 20 people. More than 10 of them were locals, so the local tax would be discounted. In addition, he hired 9 special people, so the tax would be reduced a little more. Altogether, according to the calculations of the accountant that Moses Adams found, Jiang Hai only had to pay $172,3446.7 this year. Moreover, after the tax filing, he would return $50 to Jiang Hai to buy pasture and fish food. Although $1 million wasn't a small amount, it wasn't much compared to the $4 million that Jiang Hai had calculated back then. So after paying this amount, Jiang Hai still had a lot of money left. It was enough for him to buy whatever he wanted. At this moment, he was wandering around just to see if there was anything interesting. However, after looking around, Jiang Hai wasn't interested in many things. He wasn't interested in old home appliances, game consoles, electric motors, fishing nets, clothes, and the like. What he was really interested in were some handicrafts and books. The so-called handicrafts were mainly wood carvings. These things were said to have been carved by the Native Americans. In fact, Jiang Hai had seen the Iroquois carving them. After they were passed down, they were indeed fun to collect. Jiang Hai picked some good-looking ones, such as carved eagles, deer, mountain lions, and so on. He bought more than 10 carvings in total. These things could be put in his house. When he looked at them normally, they would give off a very stylish feeling. Just as Jiang Hai put away these wood carvings and was about to leave, he suddenly heard a shout. "A treasure map! Come and look at a treasure map! A treasure map left behind by real pirates!" Looking in the direction of the voice, Jiang Hai saw that the person hawking there was a big man. This big man looked to be more than 2 meters tall and had a big beard. At this moment, he was waving a piece of cloth made of cowhide. Jiang Hai had seen this guy before. He was also a fisherman. When he went to sell fish, Jiang Hai had met him a few times, but they hadn't communicated. Hearing his words now, Jiang Hai was a little surprised. In fact, ever since he got those gold coins last time, Jiang Hai had been a little interested in these treasures. However, he wasn't sure where the ships were. The sea was huge, and it wasn't easy to find them. Secondly, Jiang Hai felt that he didn't have the ability to protect himself in the sea. If he encountered a sea monster or something like that, he would be done for. However, being afraid didn't mean that he wasn't interested. Now that he heard that there was a treasure map, Jiang Hai slowly came over. When he saw Jiang Hai coming over, the big man couldn't help but stop hawking and look at Jiang Hai with a smile. Chapter 272. Hey Jiang, how is it? My lucky manor lord. Are you interested in my treasure map? Seeing Jiang Hai squatting down and looking around casually, the big man couldn't help but smile and squat down with a proud face. I'm a little interested. Are all the treasure maps you have here real? Jiang Hai casually flipped through the sea map in front of him. After all, he also has a fish farm, so he also has some understanding of sea maps. Although he is not as good as a real navigator and a captain, at least he can still understand sea maps. Of course, you can insult my things as fake, but you can't insult a great Viking pirate's things as fake. These things were all brought by my great-grandfather from Northern Europe. Not only are there sea maps near the Caribbean Sea and shipwreck routes, but there are also maps of the Atlantic Ocean and Europe. They are absolutely authentic. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the big man here said with some unwillingness, "That's enough. The only one with Viking blood here is Edward Anderson. He is now employed by the young man in front of you. If old man Anderson knows that you dare to bluff his boss, be careful that he will stuff your head into your X-hole." Just as the big man in front of him was talking, a man sitting next to him couldn't help but laugh and say, "Jiang Hai also has some impression of this man. He is also a person who often mingles in the fish market. He used to be together with this man, so he should also be a resident of Winthrop. At this time, he is also selling things there, basically some small appliances and books. Hey Soren, if you didn't ruin my show, I would have invited you for a drink in the evening, but now the wine is gone. Hearing Soren's words, the man who was still selling Jianghai sea maps said helplessly, "Don't, Jiang, to be honest, this guy's family is indeed from Europe. His sea maps are also real, but unfortunately, someone bought them before. The sea maps are real, but they couldn't be salvaged, so if you just buy a sea map as an ornament, it's a good choice." As soon as he heard about wine, the man immediately changed his attitude. For a fisherman and a sailor, the most attractive thing is naturally women, and in addition to women, the only thing that can't be missing on the sea is wine, because looking at the same scenery every day will really drive people crazy. Sometimes getting drunk was the happiest thing in the world. Therefore fishermen, to some extent, are 90% alcoholics. As soon as this guy said it, Soren's alcohol bug came out. Although he is still very afraid of Edward Anderson, the descendant of a former pirate, it is said that he killed killer whales and trained frogmen of the United States. But compared to a good glass of wine, these are nothing. Why are the sea maps real, but they can't be salvaged? Hearing this man's words, Jiang Hai was also stunned. Originally he wanted to leave, since these sea maps were not real, they were meaningless to him. But when he heard this man's words, Jiang Hai, who was about to leave, stopped temporarily. But this time, before the two men finished speaking, a voice suddenly came from behind Jiang Hai. "Because it's too deep." Jiang Hai looked back and unexpectedly found an acquaintance, Bob George, the owner of the horse farm when Jiang Hai bought the horse. Compared with this old gentleman, Jiang Hai was more familiar with his daughter, Delia, who was following behind him. "Hello, Jiang. I heard that you recently made a lot of money at the New York Beef Show." Seeing Jiang Hai turn his head, Bob George came forward and hugged Jiang Hai and said with a smile, compared with the last time, this time he was obviously more enthusiastic than the last time. After all, no one would refuse a billionaire, and a billionaire who has proven his friendship. Since there is this relationship, he naturally has to seize it. "Hello, Mr. George, how have you been?" Hearing his words, Jiang Hai also smiled and said to him, "Haha, still the same." Seeing that Jiang Hai still remembered him, Bob George also said with a smile. And behind him, Delia was also looking at Jiang Hai curiously. In fact, to be honest, Delia didn't have a good or bad impression of Jiang Hai. From the beginning she met Jiang Hai, she was more curious about Asians. But later, when she learned that he had good ball skills, she also wanted to contact him. But she called Jiang Hai, but Jiang Hai never called or sent a text message. So the little girl quickly forgot about Jiang Hai. This year, she was about to enter college. Although the college entrance examination in the United States was not as difficult as the one in China, she still had to take the exam. She didn't consider the school's recommendation, because she was not a good person when she was in school. Although she didn't change boyfriends more frequently than she changed clothes. As the captain of the cheerleading team, she naturally changed boyfriends several times, and her reputation in school was naturally not very good. And for the formal exam, she felt that if she took the dance exam, she might get a good score. But if she took the cultural exam, she had the urge to die. She definitely couldn't go to college, community college was more likely, so she was going to find a job in advance. Going home to help her father take care of the horse farm was not what she wanted. Now if she could get in touch with the billionaire Jiang Hai, it might be an opportunity. At this time, looking at the enthusiastic look of Jiang Hai and her father, she pretended to be a lady behind their backs. "You just said that his sea maps are real, but they can't be fished out because it's too deep?" No matter what Delia thought at this time, Jiang Hai had finished exchanging pleasantries with her father. In fact, the two were not very familiar with each other, so the so-called exchanging pleasantries was just a few words. Compared to chatting with the old man, Jiang Hai wanted to know the story of these sea maps more. Hearing Jiang Hai ask about this, Bob George couldn't help but smile and say, "This guy's grandfather was the first European to come to the American continent, and he is indeed the descendant of a pirate. You know what happened to June Flower? His grandfather was indeed sent here because of pirates. The sea maps he brought are 90% real, and until his father's generation, he used these sea maps to make a fortune. In fact, this matter was not a secret in Winthrop, and many people knew about it. The man's father had once used these charts to exchange for a certain amount of money with some high-ranking officials and nobles. There were indeed some very valuable sunken ships in these charts, which had brought his father a lot of money, but unfortunately, his father was a drunkard and gambler, and later got addicted to drugs, and the money he exchanged for was all used up. In the end, when the man was 12 years old, he died in a car accident, and his father only left behind these sunken ships that were confirmed to be unsalvageable after being sold, because these sunken ships were really too deep. Using some submarines to explore, these sunken ships were basically about 8,000 meters below sea level, and even more than 10,000 meters below sea level. With the current level of the world, it was very troublesome to fish up a ship of about 5,000 meters. For example, the United Kingdom, with the whole country's strength, at most they could only fish up a ship of 4.8 kilometers, which is about 4,800 meters deep. 8,000 meters was really something that could be fished up, and it would not cost as much money. After all, not all sunken ships were called South China Sea No. 1, even if these ships were pirate ships. But not all pirate ships were rich. Pirates also needed to fight. Even if there were some valuable things on the main ship, secondary ship, and so on, it would be enough to salvage them. But this money was clearly not enough to salvage them. Hearing Bob George's words, the big man opposite him smiled a little awkwardly. It was true, and he had nothing to refute, but his words made Jiang Hai feel a little moved. Others could not enter the deep sea because of the water pressure, but he did not care. He was not afraid of water pressure, and he did not need to breathe, so he did not care about going into the water. The only thing he needed to worry about was his safety. But even if he could not use it now, it did not mean that he could not use it in the future. After hesitating for a moment, Jiang Hai suddenly turned his head and said to the man, "I want one of each of your sea maps. One of each. What do you want these things for? Even if you want to collect them, you should want some authentic ones. These are clearly printed." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Bob George was a little confused. He had said everything he wanted to say. Did he think he was lying to him? Otherwise, why would there be such a big reaction? One of each. Oh, I just feel that if I put these sea maps on my ship, then take some photos and send them back to China, it would be very interesting. Name a price, one of each of these, how much? Hearing Bob George's words, Jiang Hai smiled and said indifferently, he did not need these maps, but the treasures sleeping in the sea were very useful. Well, the hobbies of rich people are always different from ours. Haha, if you have time, remember to come to my horse farm. I recently got a lot of good horses. Seeing that Jiang Hai did not listen to him, Bob George felt offended, so he did not say much. After saying a few words to Jiang Hai politely, he left with his daughter. At this time, Jiang Hai did not have the leisure to care what the old man was thinking. He was still looking at the man in front of him. One of each, how much? Taking out his wallet, Jiang Hai looked at him with a serious face and said word by word. Hey brother, 17 sea maps, 1 franklin, all yours. Hearing Jiang Hai say it again, the man reacted and immediately picked up one of each from the stall, then handed it to Jiang Hai and said excitedly. Jiang Hai did not refuse. He took the 17 sea maps in his hand and gave him $100 each. Jiang Hai took these things back to Robbins. Now he could not wait to study these sea maps. Chapter 273. Hey boss, what did you buy? Back in the parking lot, Jiang Hai saw Robbins Garcia smoking a cigarette from a distance. When he saw Jiang Hai coming over, Robbins Garcia stood up and said with a smile, 9 out of 10 American cowboys were heavy smokers. They were different from seafarers. Seafarers were very bored except for fishing and dealing with stormy weather. So they all liked to drink, especially hard liquor that could get them drunk. But cowboys were different. They couldn't drink too much because they had to let the cows out to graze on time every morning. clean the cowshed, and watch the cows. So although they were willing to drink, they were more willing to drink beer that was hard to get drunk. Compared to the boredom of seafarers, they were also bored when they were herding cows, but their eyes couldn't leave the cows. So most cowboys liked to smoke, but they didn't smoke cigarettes with filters. Because of this, it was very troublesome to throw a cigarette butt. Naturally, it was not allowed to throw a cigarette butt in the pasture. A small breeze would turn this cigarette butt into a time bomb. Therefore, these cowboys prefer to smoke pipes. Don't think that tobacco is cheap. In fact, the tobacco in the pipe is not as expensive as the box of cigarettes sold outside. Especially Robbins and the others, Jiang Hai gives them the highest salary among the cowboys. So the tobacco they bought was also quite good. After smoking, they poured the remaining ash in the pipe into a leather bag they carried with them, so that they could clean it up. Look, I got some sea maps. Hearing Robbins Garcia's words, Jiang Hai raised the stack of papers in his hand. Oh damn, Walter, you dare to cheat my boss. Let's go, boss, I'll get justice for you. When he heard Jiang Hai's words, Robbins Garcia couldn't help but frown. Just like Bob George, Robbins Garcia was also an old man in this town. Naturally, he had some understanding of the guy who sold the sea maps. If he was just deceiving a foreigner, probably no one would care. However, he was deceiving his boss. That was unacceptable. I know that these ships can't be salvaged because they're too deep. Someone has already told me that. I'm just going to buy these sea charts and take some photos in my ship. Don't be so angry. As soon as he heard that Luo Binsi was going to find that person, Jiang Hai immediately stopped him and said with a smile. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Luo Binsi frowned, but didn't say anything. Since Jiang Hai and that guy were willing to fight, he couldn't say anything and could only nod helplessly. After that, the two of them got into the car and headed towards Jiang Hai's manor. On the way back, Jiang Hai kept looking at his sea map. These 17 sea maps were all distributed in the Atlantic Ocean. 3 of the sea maps were in the North Pole, 6 in Europe, 3 in the Gulf of Mexico, and 5 in the Caribbean Sea. Jiang Hai wouldn't go to the North Pole for the time being. First, it was too far. Second, it was too cold. He didn't have the equipment to sail in the North Pole. Jiang Hai didn't want to go to Europe. After all, there were too many things to do in Europe. Especially in these sea maps, the original owner of the sunken ship may have some trouble. Because in the special era of the Middle Ages, pirates were actually more of a country's naval forces. These pirates had official backing. They robbed the ships of all countries, but secretly, they could pay some tribute to other countries to get protection. For example, the famous British started as a pirate. After all, before the British, the real dominators of the sea were Spain, the Netherlands, and other countries. The empire where the sun never sets slowly rose under such a situation. Spain and other countries were famous for being shameless. Generally, as long as the ship was related to these countries, they wouldn't let it go. Even if Jiang Hai didn't salvage the ship, it would be troublesome if these countries found out about it when he was selling it. Then, only the Gulf of Mexico and the Caribbean Sea were left. Looking at these sea maps, Jiang Hai's mouth unconsciously cracked open. He now had the idea of going there to play. It was just a matter of time. After all, he had money now, and he didn't have anything to do recently. It was good to go out to play. He had to admit that sometimes Jiang Hai was an impulsive person. Once he thought of something, he wanted to do it. Now that he wanted to go to the tropics to search for treasures, his heart was beating fast. He was really a little excited. However, he knew that it wouldn't be easy to go there. First of all, if he was alone, he wouldn't even be able to sail his boat. Therefore, he needed some sailors who knew how to talk. Secondly, there was the issue of safety along the way. After all, this was considered a circle along the east coast. He had to be careful. Just as Jiang Hai was thinking about it, the car had returned to Jiang Hai's manor. After entering the gate, Jiang Hai's car stopped in front of the villa. As soon as he got out of the car, little Huang and Xiaobai, who were playing outside the villa, ran over. Maybe they heard the dog barking. Delina and Marian also came out of their house. After patting the dog's head, Jiang Hai walked into the villa first. He looked around and found that Qi Li and the others weren't there. Where are they? Did they leave? Looking at Delina and Marion behind him, Jiang Hai asked curiously. Pra Walton went to the winery, and Selena Gomez went to the beach. As for Keely, who claimed to be your wife, she went to the cowshed. Jiang, is that woman really your wife? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Delina looked at Jiang Hai with her big eyes full of curiosity. Well, yes, but we don't have any feelings for each other. Anyway, I'll tell you about it. Hearing Delina's question, Jiang Hai also felt that his daughter should have the right to know about his marriage situation. So he sat on the sofa. Delina and Marion sat on the left and right of Jiang Hai, listening to Jiang Hai's story. At this time, the four women were having a lot of fun. Yesterday, Aphrodite and the others played all day, so they naturally had to work today to take care of the grapevines. After learning about this matter, Pra Walton, who was originally staring at Selena Gomez, took the initiative to go to the winery and work with these beauties there. Of course, rather than saying that she was working, it was better to say that she was a hindrance. Even though Pra Walton was a real rich man, she didn't drink red wine unless it was the best. She also had some understanding of how red wine was brewed. However, she didn't know much about taking care of the grapevines. Although Aphrodite and the others were a little annoyed with her, they couldn't speak and could only endure it. Fortunately, it was all within their tolerable range. As for Selena Gomez, who had finally gotten rid of Pra Walton, she went to the beach alone. Although she had only been here for a day yesterday, to be honest, she already liked Jiang Hai's beach. The gentle breeze was really comfortable, and the quality of the sand was also excellent. Especially when swimming, she could see colorful corals when snorkeling. The natural environment was very well protected, and it wasn't just the natural environment. Jiang Hai's beach even had Wi-Fi, which made her very happy. Here she enjoyed the sea breeze, drank drinks and played games. When she was tired, she would go to the sea to see the fish. When she was hungry, she would ride the four-wheeled motorcycle back to the villa to rest and eat. This kind of life was too beautiful. As for Chi Li and her little assistant, they were near the cowshed, listening to Big Mouth Philip introduce Jiang Hai's cowshed. Philip didn't know the relationship between Chi Li and Jiang Hai, so he thought this woman was a person who came to buy cows. Naturally, he praised the cows he raised endlessly. Of course, what he said was also the truth. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that Jiang Hai's cows were the best in the world. Except for the fact that they weren't well known. They beat all of their kind in seconds. Since they woke up in the morning and had breakfast, Chi Li and her assistant had been staying here. Although in the beginning, because of the smell, they almost fainted from the stench, but after going to the wind and adapting to it, they felt that it was acceptable. This was Jiang Hai's cows. If it were anyone else, they would have fainted long ago. I didn't expect Jiang Hai to be so extravagant. The value of this manor and this herd of cows is almost comparable to our company. After getting a general understanding of the situation, Chi Li and her assistant went to a small slope on the lawn to rest. In front of them were Jiang Hai's more than 10,000 cows. Looking at the cows, eating the grass was really spectacular. At this time, the assistant said to Chi Li with some lingering fear in her heart. Originally, this little assistant really looked down on Jiang Hai and thought that Jiang Hai wasn't worthy of their President Chi. But in the past 6 months, a lot of things really happened. The person she looked down on the most in the past seemed to have become someone she needed to look up to in an instant. Yes, the total value of these cows is about 3 billion. If Jiang Hai sells all the cows, the money he earns should be higher than the total output of our company. And don't forget, it's only been 6 months. Jiang Hai can't raise any more cows in the future. 1 wave of 3 billion, 10 waves of 30 billion, 1 wave of 300 billion. TSK, this is really a place that can lay golden eggs. Looking at the grassland in front of her, Chi Li's eyes were like candles. I really didn't know that our son-in-law had such ability before. The assistant said helplessly. Yes, this Jiang Hai, I can't see through him more and more. I'm now interested in him as a person and his cows. You're tuning in to the Li Mei Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.